Eyewitness News at 7 starts streaming now.
And welcome everybody to our special election night edition of Eyewitness News here at 7 o'clock.
In less than a minute, polls will be closed across the city of Chicago, and our team of reporters is spread out around the city, keeping a close eye on results as they come in real time tonight.
And of course, the biggest race we are watching tonight, of course, is the race for mayor. The candidates out today making last minute to the voters.
If you didn't know by now, 9 candidates are in the running. If no candidate receives more than 50% of the vote, there will be a runoff on April 4th, and that sounds likely. Voters are also electing dozens of alderpeople in wards across this city.
So let's begin tonight with the mayoral race. Mayor Lori Lightfoot fighting for a second term.
ABC 7 political reporter Craig Wall kicks off our coverage live at Lightfoot's campaign headquarters. Craig?
Yeah, guys, we are at Carpenter's Hall here in the River North neighborhood. Doors just opening up, supporters just starting to trickle in. You know, for Mayor Lightfoot, all the work of the past year or so has been done. Now it's really simply up to the voters. Mayor Lightfoot, though, making the most of her last day, making 7 stops, including one over on the west side, a meeting where she campaigned with 28 aldermen, and making the most of trying to meet with the voters. She's also making a time on election day stop at Manny's Deli. The clock tight to make one of the top 2 spots, which would put her into the April 4th runoff election. Lightfoot campaigning with the message that she is the only candidate who can beat frontrunner Paul Vallas, who is the current frontrunner.
We've been connecting all over the city. We've had people doing phone banking for 6 weeks, making 15,000, 20,000 calls a night or more. So we are leaving no stone unturned.
Now, the polls suggest that Lightfoot is a tight battle for second place with Commissioner Brenda Johnson as well as Congressman Chuy Garcia. You know, it has been 40 years since an elected incumbent mayor did not win a second term. Mayor Lightfoot making history 4 years ago. She's hoping to avoid making a different kind of history tonight. Live in the River North, Craig Wall, ABC 7.
All right, a lot on the line tonight. Thanks so much for that update, Craig. Game to race for mayor.
He's been leading in many recent polls in the lead up to today's election. Sarah Schulte is at Vallas's campaign headquarters with more. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Rob. Well, known as a policy wonk who will turn 70 in the spring, Paul Vallas is an unlikely frontrunner, but he has spent his entire campaign laser focused on one issue that resonates with voters. Well, Vallas' background and expertise is education, as he was Chicago's first CEO of Chicago Public Schools when the mayor's office took over CPS. He has made his campaign all about public safety, an issue that strikes a nerve for residents who are fed up with crime. And because of his frontrunner status, Vallas has been put on the defensive as Lightfoot and other candidates have painted him as a right-wing Republican disguised as a Democrat. Vallas has run for public office before, but has never won. He came in 9th place with about 5% of the vote when he ran for mayor in 2019, but he says his consistency and issue-oriented campaign is why voters are turning to him this time.
Whether it's schools, public safety, or finances, or even basic city services, it's as if the city that works isn't working anymore. So that's why I'm running. That's why I think I'm doing the polls, and that's why we expect to do very, very well today.
The doors have just his election party tonight. They're expecting about 300 people here. Vallas is expected to speak around 9 o'clock and talk about confident, maybe even overconfident. The name of the venue tonight is called City Hall. Live in Fulton Market, Sarah Schulte, ABC 7 with the news. Back to you.
All right, Sarah, thank you for that. Another candidate we are watching tonight is Jesus Chuy Garcia.
Mark Rivera is at Garcia's campaign headquarters for us tonight. What's going on there, Mark?
Hey, Rob and Cheryl. Yes, it is, as you can hear, it's a very loud and rambunctious event, although not many supporters have made their way in yet. Of course, Chuy Garcia, no stranger to the mayor's race, taking Rahm Emanuel to a runoff in 2015. And the big question tonight, while he is making crime a central focus of his campaign, the question now is where are those progressive votes going to go? Are they going to stick with Chuy Garcia, who got into the race late after he won his congressional election, or can he deliver on his promises adding a coach and builder. Now, he was out this morning and afternoon with Election Day glad handing, trying to reach those undecided voters and support the people he's endorsed in the aldermanic races. The latest poll showing him behind Brandon Johnson and Lori Lightfoot for a shot at a spot in that potential runoff election. But this time, he is running for mayor without the support of the Chicago Teachers Union, who instead threw its weight behind Brandon Johnson very early on in the race. Chewy himself not announcing, as I said, his run for mayor until after winning his latest bid for re-election to Congress.
This race, as we expected, is tightened up. We thought that would happen. That's why getting the vote out is so important. The other factor is how the board processes the vote by mail ballots. It could be that if things are really tight and if votes that were cast the last 2 days aren't counted, that it could be a late, which really casts a lot of uncertainty into the race and what candidates do starting tomorrow.
Yeah, there are big questions if we're going to know tonight who actually is in or in. Of course, today Garcia also touting his experience in Washington as a congressman, saying that that the city needs that expertise and needs all the help that it can get from Washington and from Springfield. Live in Little Village, Mark Rivera, ABC 7 Eyewitness, back to you.
All right, thanks so much for that, Mark. Now, Brandon Johnson's mayoral campaign has experienced recent in the final weeks before this election.
Is it enough to get him to the runoff? Leah Hope standing by at Johnson's campaign headquarters with the latest for us. Hi, Leah.
Good evening, and the party is definitely starting here on the west side. We're in the Austin neighborhood. People are starting to come in. The music is up. You can definitely hear that behind me. It's an election night for Brandon Johnson and his campaign headquarters and all of those supporters who have been with him these last few weeks and few months. As we've been hearing, so many candidates. Is this going to be something that, mobilizes people and galvanizes people to come because they support a candidate or another, or is it just too overwhelming and people will wait to see what happens with the runoff? Well, Brandon Johnson, it's that people will come out. We caught up with him earlier, talking with voters, potential voters, trying to get a last-minute connection to let them know what he stands for. He's a former teacher. He saw the impact of closed schools, Chicago public schools. He's had an emphasis on education and is actually an organizer with CTU currently. He also is putting an emphasis on mental health. In fact, talking about something to divert some of the funding to CPD, Chicago Police Department, to a mental health crisis team. He's also been talking about the economic impact Black and brown communities. This is what he said earlier.
Look, the politics of old that have failed us, they're trying to rear their ugly head again. The person who was in charge of the finances in the 90s when I was in school is why we're in this economic crisis that we're living through right now. It's why our city is less safe.
Bill Wiese, Cook County Commissioner and CTU organizer, father of three, son of a pastor, go to the 5th floor of City Hall. Well, we may not find out tonight, but we will certainly hear more from him and his advocates this evening. For now, we are live on the west side in the Austin neighborhood. Rob and Carl, back to you in the studio.
Big hypotheticals.
Everybody is asking that question tonight.
We'll see you. And we'll see you again a little later this evening. Will Wilson is running for mayor of Chicago again.
So let's check in with Karen Jordan. She is live at Wilson's campaign headquarters for us tonight. Hey, Karen.
Hey, Cheryl and Rob. The ballroom here at the Swiss Hotel has been filling up with Willie Wilson supporters. A live band is playing Ain't No Stopping Us Now. That's perhaps a good sign. However, Willie Wilson has run several times for public office, although he has never been elected. But this time around, he's hoping that he's made enough inroads in different communities to make him the front runner. Wilson actually got started this morning trying to get those last votes for the day, getting started at the original Pancake House on 47th Street. This 4-year-old millionaire businessman has frequently given away cash, prompting his rivals to raise concerns about possible ethical violations, but there has been no determination of any wrongdoing. Wilson's base is on the south and west sides, and he has been working this time around to make inroads on the northwest side. He says that he will make fighting crime his priority, generating controversy at one point for he made, saying that officers should be allowed to hunt suspects down like rabbits, and he stands by those comments. Now, back here live is one of 7 black candidates, so he will be hard-pressed to make the runoff by winning only black majority wards. So we should find out tonight if he was able to connect with a cross-section of the city. That's the latest here at the Swiss Hotel. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
Music playing in the background, McFadden and Whitehead, ain't no stopping us now. So we'll see what happens later on tonight. Thanks so much, Karen, for that report. And remember, there are 9 candidates in the race for Chicago mayor. So let's take a look at all of them.
We'll be watching throughout the night as results come in to see who will make it to the expected runoff. Chicago election early, start to see some mail-in returns here by 7:15. So we'll anticipate that and get information to you as soon as we have it. So here tonight to talk about this election and some of the results we're seeing, 67 politicalist Laura Washington.
And of course, David Greinsing, who is the president of the Better Government Association. We consider you both family because you're here on the very important night.
Thank you. We're so excited to see you. We got our caffeine. It is a reunion from the last election.
Back together again.
A lot of long hours
yes,
together.
right. Let's get comfortable. We've got our notes, we've got our coffee and water, and we've got each other because we're going to get into it. Talk about the mayoral race. Last time in 2019, when Mayor Lightfoot ran and won, she won all 50 wards, and in that race against Toni Preckwinkle. Tonight, it is up for grabs.
Well, you know, she came out of nowhere. Right now, her political future is really on the line. She came in as a former anti-corruption mayor. She blew away a lot of very prominent Democratic Party politicians, and here she is now fighting for her life. And so the big question is she going to be the first mayor in many, many decades, incumbent mayor, to lose an election and to be booted out of office? And then on the other side, we have a Brandon Johnson who, in some ways, is very similar to her, coming out of nowhere. Most people didn't know who he was a few months ago. He is one of the front runners.
Your City Hall is going to look completely different after this election, too, and how much support she had and how she won all 50 of those wards. Judging by the endorsements she got, it seemed like that's going to happen for her. Paul Vallas, though, David, everyone seems to be resigned, including the current mayor, to the fact that he's the front runner. And that happened pretty quickly this election season.
Yes, it did. He locked in support from the northwest and southwest sides where there are a lot of police and firefighters, and he has the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police, which is helping him out. He also, in Chicago, with our racial politics, he is the only white candidate, which no doubt helps him. The real fight for all of them is going to be the Lake Forts, how people, each one of the leading candidates, their base of support. The real question becomes, A, do they hold their base, and B, how do they do in the lakefront wards? And those may prove challenging for Vallas, but probably not challenging enough to keep him out of the runoff. Most people are expecting that he makes the runoff.
So last time in 2019, when he ran, he was 9th in the candidate field. Talk about those mail-in ballots. How do they affect Paul Vallas? Some say it's in his favor and it benefits him.
Well, first of all, there's a large number. There's about 100,000 ballots that we will probably not be counting tonight. And if the habits elsewhere come into play, it tends to be older folks who tend to mail in their ballots. Younger people still like to go to the polls, and the older vote probably will skew a bit toward Paul Vallas, given his very disciplined this time campaign, focused on safety, public safety, and crime. And that's a message that has appealed to voters throughout the city, but certainly in elderly voters.
Talk about 100 votes that will come in today. The Board of Elections says anything that came in yesterday will be counted, but that's a good point, that there's going to be 100,000 of these that we won't know about tonight. Something else that stuck out in the demographic that you were touching on, David, is young people have not come out, Laura, to vote in. Now, that could change today.
It could, but it
doesn't seem likely.
It's not likely. Less than 3%, 2.7% the last time I looked at it of the ballot come in so far have been from younger voters. And I don't think that's good because the Board of Elections says the trend that we're seeing today is matching what we've been seeing over the last several weeks. And then on the issue of demographics, you also have a trend that shows that the white wards on the northwest side, on the north lakefront, downtown, are come in at much higher percentages than African American wards and Latino wards. So again, that would favor Paul Vallas in terms of his numbers.
All right, very good. You talked, Laura, about the importance of this vote. It's between the Black, Latino, and progressive. We'll talk about what is progressive throughout this evening tonight and what it means. We're going to now move to the aldermanic races.
Yeah, you get comfortable, you two, because we've got a long night ahead, especially as we start seeing those returns. But we mentioned the aldermanic races, and we want to address that now.
Yeah, one of the most watched aldermanic races is for Chicago's 14th ward. Now, this ward covers parts of Gage Park and Archer Heights. And the big word here, everyone knows, is going to be who is going to take that seat long held by Alderman Ed Burke.
More than 50 years. This is incredible. This is something that's just not happened in a very long time. Burke is not seeking re-election as he faces federal corruption trial set for this November. Only 2 candidates are competing in this race. And ABC 7 reporter Liz Nagy live with the latest. Hi, Liz.
Hey there, Rob. This is the location for Helu Gutierrez. She is one of the contestants running to try and represent the 14th ward. She's been backed by Chuy Garcia, so they are sharing this election night here. We're expecting her in about an hour from now. But there are 2 candidates in the race. But like you said, that's just part of the story. No matter what happens in this race tonight, history will be made because for the first time in more than half a century, the voters in the 14th ward will be represented by someone who's not Ed Burke.
The Southwest Side 14th Ward has long been the untouchable domain of Chicago's longest-serving alderman, Ed Burke. Now, with the one-time dean of the city council under federal indictment, voters in Archer Heights and Gage Park are now choosing a new face to represent them for the first time since the late 60s. A longtime employee of the Cook County Clerk's office, Raul Reyes, is running with the backing of Ed Burke.
It's the people that asked me to run. They were telling me that they don't want to start new.
Reyes spent years volunteering for the former alderman's political organization, delivering services to Southwest Side residents. But it's the way that organization distributed services that inspired Helu Gutierrez to enter the race to replace Ed Burke.
To these days, they still pick and choose who to serve. That needs to end because we all deserve the same type of services.
Gutierrez moved from when she was just 15, making her way through Southwest Side Chicago Public Schools, where she became a vice principal. With the backing of Congressman Garcia, Gutierrez is now hoping the heavily Hispanic ward will choose her to represent their interests at City Hall.
When they know that I'm a former educator, that I'm a mom, I'm an immigrant, that I'm bilingual, that would advocate for every single resident in the city, they're excited.
Well, because there are only 2 candidates in this race, there is no possibility of a runoff, so voters hope to know by the end of the night here in the 14th ward who will represent them. And also for the first time ever, it will either be a Latino or Latina American representing them at City Hall. We're live in Little Village tonight. Liz Nagy, ABC 7 Eyewitness, back to you in the studio.
Absolutely. History will be made in the 14th ward tonight or this week. Thank you, Liz, for that update. Now, our I-Team investigative reporter Chuck Gowdy is live at the Board of Elections tonight. Chuck, what is the latest there?
Cheryl, we can tell you right now, based on the that have just come out here at the City Election Board, that it will be roughly a third of the registered voters in the city of Chicago who will decide the outcome of this mayoral election today and also the city council ward elections, those elections for aldermen. Here is the number that they're looking at right now. It is 32.1%. That is what the turnout is as of the 7 p.m. poll closing. Now, that doesn't take into account 99,000 mail ballots that were dropped off today. Those will be counted, added to the mix starting tomorrow. The mail ballots that have been received yesterday up until today, those are all being folded into the numbers tonight, and those will be part of the official count that we will be giving out as this evening progresses. But there's still a lot of votes that are out there, the mail votes that were dropped into the mail today or dropped off at those vaults, and those will be counted starting tomorrow morning. But the turnout, a little over 32%, probably 33-34% once you get all of those other mail ballots in counted and those that will arrive over the next few days. That means that about a third of the city's registered voters will determine this.
Chuck, the I-Team's been out there all day, and we saw some of the notes coming in from you guys that no real major problems today in the city of Chicago when it came to judges, and it went smoothly. Is that what they're saying?
that's been the trend, Rob, over the last several years. I mean, it used to be we had a field day at polling places back in the 70s and in the 80s, even into the 90s. All sorts of chicanery out here, electioneering, drunk election judges. There were all sorts of problems at the polling places that in some cases resulted in polling places, precincts having to stay open late. Election materials arriving hours late. That didn't happen today. There were 14 precincts that opened about an hour late or so, but they didn't have to stay open late. They processed all the voters who wanted to vote, and there were no problems. So those would certainly seem to be passed. Every election, it seems to be getting smoother.
All right, that's good news to hear. All right, Chuck, thank you for that update tonight.
We all kind of nod our heads and smile, but maybe that's probably a good thing that we've got this trend of no major issues. Let's bring in our analysts again as we got some of the data there. So Chuck's saying 32.1% of voters casting their votes. Not that he said 99,000 or 100,000 of those mail-ins that will arrive today. We're 32%. It's not a huge number.
That's fairly typical for what we've seen in the last several rounds. And remember, that's 30% of registered voters. That's not 32% of the regular. So it's kind of disappointing, given that it's such an important election, that we're not seeing a better turnout. But it's typical.
It was at 20%, I think, at about 5 p.m.
Right. So let's move up a little, and of course, it's closed now. So we talked about the votes. 1983, Mayor Harold Washington was the highest turnout ever in the history of Chicago in voting from registered voters. When I talk about Harold Washington, I think about Chuy Garcia. He wanted to wait until that symbolic day to make that announcement. Do you think waiting played a role in where he is right now?
Well, there's no doubt. By waiting as long as he did, he lost the opportunity to win endorsement from the Chicago Teachers Union, which is really what has catapulted Brandon Johnson into a leadership position. Going back to the voter turnout, I would say 30% is lower than 35% in 2019, and it indicates that this groundswell that we're talking about for Johnson in these last days may not be quite what it appeared to be. You would have expected to see maybe a turnout as high as in 2019, if not higher. So that's something that for us to keep an eye out as we look at Johnson's chances of getting through.
Here we are at 7:22. We're sitting with y'all, and I think the governor's race was called. 7:22. But guess what? We do have some results coming in. So this is the first time we'll be with you. Here we go. 9% of precincts reported. Paul Vallas on top with 36% of the vote. Brandon Johnson coming in at 18%. And right there, incumbent Lori Lightfoot.
Yeah, she said she is in the fight of her life.
Yeah.
And right now, we should preface it with, it's only 9% reporting.
Right.
Jesus Chuy Garcia there at 14% with 5,000 plus votes cast for him. Then Willie Wilson coming up next with 10% with more than 3,500 votes cast for him, and Jamal Green with 2%. And we talked about the younger votes there. We'll talk about that in a minute, about 3%. Cam Buckner with 2% with 640, Sophia King with 1%, and Roderick Sawyer with 1% as well. The top, they are both aldermen from the 4th and the 6th Ward leaving to run for mayor. So we're going to see what happens. They're both from the south side of Chicago. Roderick Sawyer trying to create a dynasty, of course. Remember that his father was the former mayor of Chicago after Chuck talked about those tumultuous times, how he was appointed to become mayor here in this city. But we'll be watching the automatic races that are going to change the face of the city.
Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting. At least 14 positions open that are available. The first time we talked about it, the first time in history it's been this many after retirements, resignations.
Right. And there may be incumbents who may lose today or sometime over the next few days. So there could be even more vacancies. It's not only going to change the face of the city council, but it's going to change the way it might change the way the city council operates.
Right.
Because these are going to be much younger people. They're coming in with not the experience, but also with not having those strong ties to the Democratic Party into the machine that some of the incumbents have. I think it's going to be leaning a little bit more progressive and maybe a lot more independent because of that. And depending on who the mayor is, the mayor may have a big fight on his or her hands.
That's just it.
A bigger fight.
Versus the mayor,
well,
yes.
Didn't Del Marie Cobb said a weak mayor begets a strong council. So who knows what's going to happen after tonight.
About a third of the vote in. No surprise in that top four. They're all pretty close with Paul Vallis ahead. Ravi Baishwal's with us tonight over at the board, breaking down some of the aldermanic races. We want to see what he's seeing. Ravi, nice to see you tonight.
Rob, Cheryl, great job, and it's going to be a long night, as you've been saying, of course. And we've got some of the details here. This is, of course, some of the numbers that you've been showing, what the mayor's race is looking like. There's the city, and we'll have all the maps of the wards in the city as well. But you're talking about those aldermanic races and what's really going to be ahead for this new mayor. And clearly, it's going to be a divided council. These days of the council being a rubber stamp, getting 44 or 50 votes for every initiative that the mayor wants to have is not going to be the way the future council goes. In fact, it's actually 12 aldermen this time leaving at the end of their because either decision to retire or they decided to run for mayor or in fact they're under a federal indictment. So we're going to be chasing down some of those wards and seeing what's going on in them. But earlier you talked a little bit about what is going on the lakefront, and your guests were talking about how important those votes are going to be. Let's take a look at where some of those changes are going to be. Here's Ward 43. This is Timmy Knudsen. He is the appointed the counselor who's in there, the alderperson right now, but he's going to be in quite a race, as you can see, 79% to hold onto this seat, considered to be someone who's sort of favoring development, favoring some of the moneyed interest, if you will, on the lakeshore. These are the kinds of wards that we're going to have to take a look at tonight to see how they change in terms of how their vote breakdowns go and who they would be supporting for mayor. So that's one we're going to be watching for tonight. As well, we're going to be looking at this one. This is the 6th ward, also along the lakefront. We've got in here Marianne Lalonde. Let's bring her up. We haven't really got any votes in just yet, but she only lost in 2019, Marianne Lalonde, for this seat by 26 votes. So she's going to be hoping that she has a little bit of better luck tonight. She's going up against Kim Walz, who's a well-known political operative in the city, has worked for Congressman Mike Quigley and is well-known in Democratic circles. So there's all these kinds of races, 50 of them in all, and like we said, all kinds of turnover, unprecedented turnover that's going to be telling the tale of what this council looks like and what the new mayor, whoever that may be, maybe it's still Lori Lightfoot, whatever the new mayor after this election is going to be having to deal with. Back to you guys.
Okay, Ravi, thanks. We'll see you again throughout the night. Our Judy Sue also in the studio with us tonight. Going to be talking to some live guests, and she has one now.
Yeah, Rob and Cheryl, we are going to take a few minutes now and do a little deeper dive on this election. Look through different lenses, from those who study and teach politics to community leaders who live it every single day. Different perspectives that really kind of make up our Chicago right here. So starting right here with Jaime Dominguez. He is a political science professor at Northern University. Welcome, of course. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
You've had a very busy day today.
Yes.
Teaching. So let's start by talking about this most recent poll that you were a part of and helping to do the research, looking at really priority issues for Latino and Black voters. What did you find were the issues driving those voters to the polls?
Yeah, well, one was crime was number one, was driving that, followed by cost of living and inflation. It's a big concern. Also, jobs was a third, and then fourth was affordable housing, and then fifth was police reform and accountability in that order.
Okay, so, and I've also heard you say that while public safety has always been a concern, you have never seen a front and center in a Chicago mayoral election. Explain a little bit more about it.
Well, I think the crime now is just, before I would say it was pocketed, and it seemed to be kind of marginalized in that way. But what we've seen over the last couple of years is that crime now is just, it's everywhere, no matter where you're at, no matter what time of the day, particularly in broad daylight. We see it happening in places like on Magnificent Mile, River North, and also even like in places like Pilsen, some of the most vulnerable people, like the street vendors, are actually being assaulted at like 6 in the morning. That just was unheard of. And so I think that really has kind of coalesced the city to really kind of address that issue, because it doesn't matter where you live, no matter how much money you have, it's affecting everybody. And it impacts the city in terms of it being able to be competitive, be able to draw tourists here, to be able to have a strong space. So it's important we put a lid on it or try to control it and put strategies forward to try to address that.
You and I actually had a conversation not too long ago about all of this, in particular about the Latino vote.
Mm-hmm.
During campaign season, a lot of people talk about it, right, as a block. Now, certainly Latino voters are not a monolith vote. Historically, there have been communities that vote together, going in the same direction. How do you think race is affecting this particular race?
Well, I think based on our poll, we did see a little bit of, some kind of racial block support going towards like co-ethnic candidates. So Latinos are leaning towards Chuy Garcia, whites are leaning towards Paul Vallas, African Americans are leaning towards Lori Lightfoot. But among undecided voters, we found in fact amongst Latinos, 40% said that they would for sure vote for Chuy. So a large chunk were still undecided. But Lori Lightfoot was about 25%, and for Paul Vallas was like 20%. So a lot of votes are still out there.
When it comes to some of the key issues, was there anything that you would have heard from the candidates that you didn't hear that wasn't addressed nearly enough?
Well, just over the last couple of weeks, maybe because Congressman Garcia was the first, I think, put forward kind of a public safety plan. I don't think that there's been kind of concrete plans in terms of how they're going to actually do that. I think they're just waiting to get through this first round because I think whoever gets to the runoff is going to have to come with a kind of concrete strategic plan to actually deal with public safety, because public safety, although it's connected to crime, they're two separate things, right? Public safety is also about creating a safe space, a safe context, so that people can go about their business. And crime is how do we go about actually curbing violence? How do we go about curbing homicides, right? Do we impose stiffer penalties for types of crimes? So I think that, it has to be kind of a two-pronged approach in addressing the issue of crime and public safety.
Do you think the COVID pandemic has shifted priorities for some voters?
I think for minority voters in particular, because they were disproportionately hit very hard during the pandemic. The Latino community was particularly hit hard. Not to say that no other groups did, but they just actually took a big chunk, not a big chunk, but had a big negative impact on that community. And so that could be something that motivated. And in fact, that's something that Congressman Garcia was proposing in terms of providing some kind of tax relief for homeowners whose property bills just went out the roof.
I also want to ask you something that Craigwell reported just the other day, that while Latinos make up an estimated 29% of Chicago's population, they only make up, 11% of
registered
voters in the city of Chicago. How much progress have we made in getting out the vote and making it easier?
Well, I think, Latinos compared to other groups just tend to have just lower rates of registration, lower rates of participation. So I think in order to have a more active, a more civically engaged Latino community in politics, I think that the Democratic Party, but also the candidates, need to do a better job, I think, of engaging this electorate, not just 2 weeks or a month before an election, but actually continuously, because voting is behavioral. And so until we begin to kind of make that a priority, and also for parties and elites to demonstrate that they actually do care about having a more civically engaged electorate as a whole, that it benefits everybody, because it puts pressure on the establishment and it puts pressure on the candidates to be more specific and concrete about how they're actually going to be leaders and how they're actually going to address the policy issues that the voters want to see done.
We'll see if that happens if we approach this runoff election in April, right?
Yes,
I'm sure you'll be watching. Thank you so much for joining us. Jaime Dominguez, political science professor at Northwestern University.
My pleasure.
Thank you. All right, back to you guys.
Oh, thanks to the both of you. And we take a few minutes from the desk, and we got some new results.
I know, already, and it's 7:32 at night, so let's take a look at them. Right now, we've got Paul Vallas with 53% of the precincts reporting at this hour at 7:32. Paul Vallas with 36% of the vote, with more than 93,000 votes cast for him. Brandon Johnson in second place with 20% with 50,000 votes. And then Lori Lightfoot, the current mayor, with 16% at 40,000 votes plus cast for
Johnson extended his lead a little bit there. Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia with 14% vote, 35,949. Willie Wilson, single digits at 9% with just over 22,000 votes. And Jamal Green at 2% with 4,955 votes cast in his favor.
And the final three in this category, Cam Buckner with 2% of the vote, and Sophia King with 1%, nearly 3,000 votes cast for her. Roderick Sawyer trying to create a dynasty here. His father, the former mayor of Sawyer, with 1% of the votes cast.
53% of precincts in, so we've made some headway there. Over half the precincts now reporting. There are multiple wards, as we've been talking about tonight, on Chicago's north side that are electing a new alderperson. 4 longtime alder people are retiring in the 43rd, 44th, 46th, and 48th wards.
And in the 43rd ward, which covers most of Lincoln Park, Knutson, Ravi was talking about him earlier, fighting to his Mayor Lovett appointed him to this role after former alderwoman Michelle Smith stepped down. So let's take a look at some of the numbers. With 61% reporting from the precincts at this hour, Timmy's still ahead with 20%, with more than 2,000 votes cast on his behalf. And then Brian Comer with nearly 2,000 votes cast for him at 24%, and Rebecca Janowitz at 20% with close to 1,600 there.
Wendy Taylor-Nation's coming in at 13%, just over 1,000 votes for her, 61% of precincts reporting. Steve Botsford has 9% there, 663 votes. And Steve McClellan with 7% at 528 votes. Tom Tunney retiring as alderman of the 44th Ward, which represents parts of Lakeview. Chief of Staff Bennett Lawson, the only candidate running to succeed him. Chicago's 46th Ward will also see a new alderperson, James Kaplan, retiring. That ward covers Uptown, Buena Park, and part of Lakeview East.
All right, so let's take a look at the result of this. With only 35 reporting for this ward in the 46th Ward, Angela Clay at 35% with almost 1,600 votes cast on her behalf. Kim Waltz with 24%, more than 1,000 votes cast for her. And Marianne Lalonde, as Ravi was talking about, a hard-fought race here, 15% with 680 votes cast on her behalf.
Could come down to just a few dozen votes. Second page, as there are 6 candidates. Patrick Nagel with 14%, 635 votes, and Shauna Williams at 8% with 348, and Michael Cortez with 2% of vote, 108 votes. Mr. Cortez. In the Edgewater-Andersonville area, Harry Osterman is retiring as alderman of the 48th Ward. This is a long list, Cheryl.
Yeah. 10 candidates,
Let's
right?
try and get through them, all right?
Well, let's take a look at them. With 66% of the precincts reporting at this hour, Joe Dunn with 28%, more than 2,000 votes cast on his behalf. Lenny Mata Huppenworth with 22%, and Nick Ward with number 3 spot at 8%, more than 100 votes cast for
The
him.
next page, Isaac Fralick Jones, 10% of the votes, 866 votes cast. And Larry Svabeck has 7% with 560 votes cast. And Roxanne Volkman with 5% of the vote, 462 cast in her favor.
All right, Andy Peters with 3% with 277 votes cast on his behalf. And then Andre Peliquin with 3% of the votes. Now 66% reporting. That's a lot at this hour. Nasir Faulkner with 3% at 226 votes cast for him, and Brian Hagg at 1% with 111. Now anything can happen with only 66% of the precincts already reporting. Anything is possible. ABC 7 Stephanie Ward joining us live tonight with the latest on some of these races we just gave you numbers for tonight. Stephanie, how's it going where you are?
Hey, Robin, Cheryl, we are in Lincoln Park right now, but as you said, there will be many new faces on City Council this year representing wards here on the north side. 4 longtime aldermen are retiring this year. That's the 43rd, 44th, 46th, and 48th wards. And for the first time, their seats will now be up for grabs, including where we are right now in the 43rd ward in Lincoln Park. Chell Smith has been serving for the past 11 years. She announced she was retiring last year and life appointing Timmy Goodson as alderman of the 43rd Ward to serve as her replacement. Now Goodson is hoping to keep his spot, while 5 other candidates have come forward to challenge him. One candidate, Rebecca Janowitz, spending $750,000 of her own money to fund her campaign. I caught up with 2 candidates out at the polls today.
It's been great to be able to do the job and bring the job. I don't know what's almost 5 months. And my big picture right now, I want to let the new generation to City Council, the youngest member of City Council, and that means a lot to me.
So 2 weeks ago, Chicago Tribune endorsed me as the first candidate for this position, and that's because of my background. So I'm currently the 4-time president of the Sheffield Association, so I'm already representing 8,000 residents in this ward. I'm doing the job of a mini alderman, as my side hustle as a volunteer.
And the 44th Ward will also have a new alderman. Tom Tunney is retiring this year after representing the Lakeview neighborhood since 2002, becoming the first openly gay alderman in Chicago. His chief of staff is the only person running, so Bennett Lawson will now take over.
I've had the fortune of being with Alderman Tunney for 18 years, 15 as his chief of staff. And so I knew going into this race that there was no one who could hold a candle to my experience, certainly, or knowledge of the ward and the ability to get things done downtown.
He's been in charge of not only chief of staff, but everything, development, zoning, and he loves that stuff.
that part is really an important job for an alderman to have some background.
And the 46th Ward will also have its new leader in over a decade, as 6 candidates are running to replace Alderman James Kappelman. Then in the 48th Ward, representing the Edgewater and Andersonville neighborhoods, they will also have a new alderperson replacing outgoing Alderman Harry Osterman. As you said, there are 10 candidates running in that. So clearly the North Side is part of this unprecedented wave of aldermanic retirements, but each candidate, they need to win 50% of the vote, which that could be, a little difficult here with several candidates running in each of these races with such thin margins. So the top 2 that vote getters will run to a runoff April 4th. Live in Stephanie Wade, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
All right, Stephanie, a lot to sort through. Thank you. Well, we want to take a look at some results in the 14th Ward. This will be Ed Burke's ward after 54 years. Mr. Burke is now focused on a trial. He is not going to be the alderperson of the 14th. There are the numbers, Cheryl.
Yeah, he's been indicted on federal racketeering charges, and no matter what happens or who wins tonight in the 14th Ward, history will be made with either one of these candidates. With 80% reporting, it is 20 minutes to 8 tonight on this election night 2023. Helu Gutierrez with 64% of the vote at 2,347, and Paul Reyes with 36% with more than 1,300 votes cast for him. What are you guys thinking about what you saw there, those numbers?
Well, in that ward, first of all, the historic element of Ed Burke after half a century of being really king of that ward, no longer on the dean of the city council before he was indignantly indicted for corruption charges. And of course, the transformation of that ward, which was at one point kind of bedrock working class Irish ward. And this is now the solidification of its transformation to a very heavily Latino ward, and there's a sort of a proxy with Burke's candidate Reyes against a Chuy Garcia-backed candidate Gutierrez, and so this will tell us a little bit again about the transformation of political power.
We'll get your take, Laura, and we're going to go through our results in just a moment. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We want to pause to let our on-air audience join us, and we'll be right back in. It'll be like a minute and a half. It won't be long.
We'll see you on the other side of a break, everybody.
From ABC 7 Eyewitness News, this is a Vote 2023 election update.
Good evening, everybody. We're getting some of the first returns for the race for Chicago mayor, so let's take a look at these numbers.
With 75% of precincts reported, Paul Vallis with a big lead. Brandon Johnson and Lori Lightfoot rounding out the top 3. ABC 7 political reporter Craig Wall live at Lightfoot campaign headquarters in River North. Craig.
Hey, the crowd here continues to grow. Mayor Lori Lightfoot is watching the returns off-site. She is hoping that she is going to be able to break the runoff. She is preparing for giving a victory speech here tonight, but she's battling for second place with Brandon Johnson and Chuy Garcia. It's been 40 years since an elected incumbent mayor did not win a second term. Lightfoot hoping that she did not make history of a bad kind tonight. Back to you.
Craig, thank you for that.
Let's go to Sarah Schulte, who is live at Paul Vallis camp tonight. Sarah.
Well, Cheryl, call it overconfidence or appropriate, but the Paul Vallis' election night venue is called City Hall, and the place is filling up with very excited supporters that are expecting a very big victory tonight. Vallis is expected
to talk tonight around 9 o'clock. Live in Fulton Market, Sarah Schulte.
All right, Sarah, thank you for that so much.
We'll be back with another live update in about 40 minutes. Our live stream coverage continues on our website, wherever you stream.
Everybody to our special election night coverage, February 2023. Of course, it is a fine day in February. It is election night. People are watching closely. The polls closed about 45 minutes ago, and the numbers are coming in very quickly, as we mentioned. Yeah, very surprised about that
We
tonight.
didn't really know what to expect here. Chicago Board of Elections, we were mentioning in that quick break, they're doing well because we're getting a lot of it in, and we want to take a look at it. We're going to go through the race for mayor here. Here it is, 75% of precincts reported. Paul Vallas with a 16% lead over Brandon Johnson. Vallas more than 134,000 votes. Brandon Johnson sitting at 20% with 74,992. And current Mayor Lori Lightfoot in third place with 16% at 58,000, a little more than 58,000 votes.
And Jesus Chuy Garcia, only one of the candidates who have held 4 governmental offices, rounding out the top 4 with 14% with more than 50,000 votes cast on his behalf. And Willie Wilson, who's run for office several times, the president, of course, and Senate, he has 9% of the vote with more than 32,000 votes cast. And Jamal Green with 2% with more than 7,200 votes cast on his behalf.
One more page here. Cam Buckner with 2%, just over 7,000 votes. Sophia King at 1% with 4,442 votes. And Roderick Sawyer with 1% of the vote at 1,400. Roderick Sawyer with 1,467.
Craig Wallace tonight, our political reporter, is live at the headquarters for Mayor Lori Lightfoot. What is happening there, and what are people saying, Craig?
Yeah, right now it's surprising. We were expecting more would have been in here right now, that this hall would have been filled, but right now it's only partially filled. A lot of people here just waiting to see what happened. What is interesting as we're looking at these numbers, it's sort of breaking as how some of the latest polls were actually suggesting Paul Vallas the clear front runner, with Brandon Johnson kind of in second and Lori Lightfoot right behind. But it kind of sort of goes with what we were also seeing for some of the early votes coming in, where the wards that were favoring Paul Vallas seem to be coming in much heavier early on, and that trend seems to be continuing. And we're told Lori Lightfoot is not here on site. She's off-site watching these returns. Obviously, what she's seeing coming in right now is not breaking her way, but there's still a bunch more votes to be counting. Her team had been confident that indeed she was going to get into the runoff, but as we've already mentioned a couple times here on air and this digital newscast, it's been 40 years since an elected Chicago mayor, Jane Byrne, did not win a second term. Lori Lightfoot making history as the city's first openly gay black female mayor, and now she's looking to potentially make history, if she can't make it into the runoff, of being the first person in 40 years not to win that second term. So right now, I don't know if we can say that they're feeling nervous, but based on some of these early results, there's got to be concern. They're just wondering waiting to see where things are going to come in. If different wards, I know they're going to be watching a lot of specific wards to see what might give them an idea. A lot of them on the west side. But that's where I was really battling with Brandon Johnson for a lot of votes, as well as Willie Wilson. You remember he did very, very well 4 years ago, taking the greatest number of black wards. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this continues to develop over the evening. But with 25 of the vote, the precincts counted already, it's very interesting to see how this is breaking.
Yeah, and Craig, we have just been told that the Associated Press is confirming that Paul Vallas will be considered as one of the top 2 candidates for the runoff election come April 4th. Very interesting that it's happened already, and it's only 7:50 at night, but it has been confirmed. The Associated Press is saying that Paul Vallas, the former CEO of Chicago Public Schools, who ran in 2019 against Mayor Lori Lightfoot, he ended up being 9th out of 14 candidates. Then he endorsed her. Tonight, he is definitely in the running for the runoff. Let's go live now to Sarah Schulte. She is at the Vallas campaign headquarters. Sarah, have they heard the news there?
Well, you know, I don't think they have heard the news here, but yeah, hold on. I was just actually talking to Vallas's one of their campaign people. I'm not sure they have heard the news yet, because I think that the crowd would probably erupt if they have. But you know, it is expected. When I talked to Paul Vallas this morning, he was expecting this to be a relatively early night. They said that he was probably going to come out around 8:30 or 9 with a victory speech. So they were expecting this. They even were expecting this to be over 30%. So a lot of confidence that was going into this, which is certainly has come a long way from 4 years ago when you mentioned that Paul Vallas was 9th out of 14. He had about 5% of the vote 4 years ago. What made the difference this time? Well, Paul Vallas says what made the difference is that he's just focused on issues. Really one particular issue is public safety. Paul Vallas has been running on public safety this entire time, even though, as we know, his background is education. He was the first Chicago Public Schools' very first CEO when the state legislature handed CPS over to the mayor's office. Then he went on to run school districts in Connecticut, in Philadelphia, in New Orleans, and that's really is what his expertise is. But he says that he is now the kind of the public safety law and order candidate, and he has a big plan on how he is going to solve the crime issue here in Chicago. And obviously it is something that definitely has resonated with voters, as we have seen the results come in. Live in Fulton Market, Sarah Schulte, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
That place is about to get a little louder.
Yeah, Sarah said symbolically it is
I
called
think so.
City Hall. Sarah, you've been talking about it all night long. The venue is City Hall. Perhaps he was manifesting something on his life, Sarah?
Right.
Right. Well, you know, I'll tell you something. It was really by accident. It was a campaign staffer that had attended a previous event here and thought, boy, this would be really a great election night event. So,
Is anything by accident in Chicago politics? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Sarah, thanks a lot. We'll let you check in with his campaign managers. And it's a battle for one now, Cheryl.
Right.
The Associated Press saying Vallas has qualified. So now Lori Lightfoot, Brandon Johnson, some of those that are in the top 3 or 4, they got one spot to compete for. Ravi Baishwal is breaking down some of the data for us, and he's got some new information. Hey, Ravi.
Hey, Robbie, Cheryl. Yeah, that's a big development here tonight. So let's take a look at some of those numbers that you're talking about right there in terms of where the mayor's race is right now. So, of course, Paul Vallas sitting at 35%, Brandon Johnson solid at 20%, Lori Lightfoot at 16%. But let's take a look at these numbers right here. This is how much each of these other competitors are behind Paul Vallas. 63,000 votes behind, and Lori Lightfoot 80,000 votes behind. So that means what? That's about a 17,000 vote difference to get into that number 2 slot. So that race, the percentages look like it's kind of big, but the race in terms of votes, relatively small. So we'll see how those votes come out here tonight in terms of what that race for second place is going to look like. And I want to take it back to 2019 and the mayor's race back then. Now, it's interesting to see where Paul Vallas's his strength is coming from. Because take a look at this, what this is called a heat map. This is where all the competitors back in 2019 did presumably, the majority of the votes. And as you can see, these areas up in the northwest side and towards the west side were not areas necessarily that Lori Lightfoot, though she did win 7 wards, not where she was necessarily leading. Like if you take a look at one of these wards up here in the north, this is the 45th ward. Bill Daley, who at that time was one of the leading candidates back in 2019, and of course you could argue the leading white candidate in that mayor's race, was actually who was getting the most votes up in there. This seems to be where Mr. Vallas is doing very well tonight. So we are expecting later on, much later on actually, to get ward by ward details of how the vote for this year is working out. But it appears that where these issues of public safety and crime and so on are very important to the people who live there, like on the northwest side, Paul Vallas is doing very well. And you can see the kind of increase, you can see the kind of lead that he has over the second place finisher right now. Clearly, about 90,000 votes right there. But there is a little bit of a margin between Brandon Johnson and Lori Lightfoot. We'll see if Lori Lightfoot is able to close that gap where Brandon Johnson can actually consolidate the kind of support that he has. Later on, we'll talk a little bit more about how this is working out in terms of the wards, what that means for what kinds of issues be at play as we run up to a runoff in a couple of weeks from now. But right now, you can see it's a very dynamic race for second place.
Ravi talks about the heat map. Some of those wards, a lot of those wards that went to Mayor Lori Lightfoot in 2019 have now switched over to Paul Vallas. Vallas raising more than $5 million right behind Willie Wilson, who raised $6 million, most of it his own money, for his campaign. And we're talking about Paul Vallas. In 2019, he had left. Sarah talked about how he went to go and be head of schools in Philadelphia and in Louisiana. People seem to have forgot who he was, but then he comes back in 2023. 2022 with a robust campaign to fight crime. He has now been endorsed by the FP. But let's talk about some of the missteps in the last couple of weeks. Maybe they didn't seem to the people, the tweets that people talked about. The tweets, he first said that they were, an intern made those tweets, and he said he probably was hacked. And then the residency issue. So perhaps none of these issues or missteps matter to the people, because tonight it says something very different.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's quite a Teflon yet. He really has shrugged off some of these issues. And when you look at those lakefront wards and the fact that crime has shown up in those wards at a level that it previously was not quite so present. And so it's an indication to select public safety and crime as the key issue, even though his big strength is in education, was a politically savvy move. And his discipline as a campaigner at this time around, compared to last time in 2019, was unbelievable.
Yeah, it really was.
The big joke about him is that he could never shut up, and that he did not have the discipline, and he didn't have the staff. He had issues in previous campaigns where he was afraid to fly, and he couldn't even travel around. I think he's got Joe Trippi, who was a very well-known national political player in the Democratic Party, advising him. The other thing, too, is that, this is a different race than it was 4 years ago. We had 14 candidates. We had several white candidates in that race. Mm-hmm. This time we've only got one. And Chicago, unfortunately, is a racial city, and there are many parts of this city that are going to respond to a white candidate, and that's going to be their first choice. And I think that's giving Vallas a big advantage.
You mentioned, we're going to go to Leah. Real quick, you mentioned some missteps or some stumbles late in this campaign. Lori, Michelle, go ahead. You want us to keep going? Okay. Lori Lightfoot had said something just a few weeks ago about, if you're not going to vote for me, don't vote. And then backpedaled on that and said, that was taken out of context. That's not what I meant. But some argue that might have pushed Johnson ahead because he was very upset by some of those comments.
It was a direct racial appeal, and it shows that she was really concerned about the black vote. She come down to the conclusion that she needed to bring the black, she had a chance, and she was fighting desperately with Brandon Johnson for that vote. I think that gave him a big advantage. Another issue is that is with Chuy Garcia. Chuy Garcia, back in November, December, he was considered the front runner in this race. The polls were saying that, and he got in late. He didn't get his advertising up on the air early enough, and Lori Lightfoot was able to really hammer away at him on the Mike Madigan connection, the San Francisco
first one out,
Right, and
The
she
attack
brought
ads.
I think she brought him down and brought his numbers down, but that probably was to the advantage of Brandon Johnson, who was the other perceived progressive in the race.
Right, and he has the big backing of the big unions. Judy talked to the professor Jaime Dominguez from the Northwestern University, and they talked about race in this vote and how important and how it will change everything. There's a saying that you cannot become mayor of Chicago without the black. You talked about the most important votes, progressive, Black and Latino. So let's break it down. What is progressive and how does it factor in on how Paul Vallas is winning so well tonight?
Well, he actually is perceived as being the most conservative among the four candidates, kind of out nip and tuck with Lori Lightfoot, who also has conservative tendencies. The progressive vote, though, there's a battle going on not just for mayor, but also in city council.
Yeah.
With all these new people, about a third of the council is going to turn over. And there's a cohort of progressive candidates, very liberal-minded people who are more aligned with the campaign platform that Brandon Johnson put together, and then the more conservative candidates who are backed by some super PACs who have been aligned around realtors, around the school movement, and other conservative forces who have backed some of these candidates. So it's both for the fifth floor of City Hall and also those who will be serving at council.
Numbers coming in tonight. We Garcia sitting in fourth place with about 14% of the vote. Our Mark Rivera is at his headquarters. We want to get with him and see how things are going there. Hi, Mark.
Yeah, Rob, a really fascinating conversation that you all were having, especially talking about the progressive vote and the Latino vote, especially our Northwestern professor, Jaime Dominguez, about the number of undecideds in the Latino vote. Obviously, Chuy Garcia courting the Latino vote, having his campaign party here in Little Village. There's a mariachi band that is just about getting ready to perform on stage. The candidate himself has not been able to, has not come yet. He's going to arrive in about a half hour to an hour from now. But the campaign is still confident, given these results so far, just because of the number of mail-in ballots that are still out there that we really kind of have don't have a real idea about in terms of how they are going to break and where that progressive vote is in terms of in that mail-in ballot. So obviously looking at these results coming through, seeing Paul Vallas in the lead so far, and AP, of course, again, reporting that he will move on to a runoff election. But we do still need to watch closely in the coming days how those mail-in ballots shake out. And I know the Garcia campaign is going to be watching that very closely, especially here in Little Village with the community surrounding, because as you said, as Laura was saying, Garcia got into this race late. He announced after he won his congressional election, and he was getting ads on TV and again faced a lot of criticism and was able to be from him during that time. The other thing is, as you all were saying as well, the union in that sense, CTU backing Brandon Johnson very early in this race. So traditionally, when you think of Chuy Garcia, especially when you're thinking back in 2015, taking Rahm Emanuel to a runoff election, and the effort that was put in the momentum behind there, see that again potentially. That was the potential in this race, and we haven't seen that in these results so far. Of course, again, those mail-in ballots are the big question mark at this point.
Okay. Mark, thank you. I want in fourth, there's not like a good mariachi band to help get out. Seriously, yeah. Thanks, Mark. We'll meet you a little bit later.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Chuy Garcia perhaps shared one of the most personal testimonies in the ads, in the campaign ads, that only did. They talked about his life, his family, his son specifically, and crime. He spent about $3 million, and Chuy stands out of the rest of the candidates because he's held 4 governmental offices. And Laura and I know we were talking about Mr. Gressing as well, talking about how it was a battle who wanted to win tonight the most. And they were saying that he came in late and didn't battle like he needed to battle, like he wanted to win this mayorship. So
that was the perception. Yeah, I mean that was
in 2 different places. He wanted to stay in Congress, but he also wanted to be mayor. And he put that was one reason why the teachers wanted to Brandon Johnson. That was a fatal move for Chuy Garcia.
That was a strategy that certainly did not work for him either. Up with the Washington announcement, it was a little personal. It was right, but he did share, like you mentioned, some personal things about his son trying to tie back into crime and violence, which, as we know, is the number one issue to voters here in the city of Chicago. Judy Sue is with us tonight. She has another guest. Let's check in with. Hi, Judy.
Hi, guys. So we're going to carry on a little bit more now. As you know, for the very first time in Chicago history, we have an Asian American majority ward in this election. And that was, a lot of work went into that. And right now I'm joined by one of the leading voices in this effort. This is Grace Chan McKibben, Executive Director of the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community. Grace, always good to see you.
Always good to see you, Judy.
As I mentioned, that this is now a reality in this election, but this work has been going on for decades. Tell us about the significance of having this Asian American majority ward now here in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, we are so excited. Last year it took 8 months of work to finally get to the first majority Asian American ward, but it's really 20 years in the making. We were, because of the population growth, we knew that we had the census numbers to support us, but really took a bit of work to get the population, because it's always, everything is not only about the numbers.
No, you say a bit, that's an understatement. It took a lot of work, but congratulations on that. But let's talk about that census number and in regards to this particular mayoral race. The Asian American population in Chicago up 29% since 2010, since the last set of numbers. So how does that translate into this mayoral race? Also, for the first time, there was a mayoral debate just before Asian American voters.
Yes, there actually have been a few mayoral debates before Asian American voters, but this one we had almost all the candidates.
That's
join.
right, almost all of the candidates.
And it was great because we had the debate or the forum translated into 7 languages simultaneously, and we asked all the questions that are important to the Asian American voters, including language access, education, and more.
And were those, what are some of the other concerns that the community really wanted to hear directly from these mayoral candidates this time around?
Yeah, as I mentioned, language access for immigrants and education, and some of the other issues are safety, but safety as it relates to opportunities as well, not just directly related to policing. And then there are also concerns about services, particularly to seniors.
Okay, so let's talk about the 11th ward. It is a crowded field there for those who are not keeping, in touch with that one. 6 candidates challenging Alderman Nicole Lee, who was appointed by the mayor. Tell us a little bit more about this race. What should people know about it?
Yes, there are 7 candidates, as we know, and for the first time, there are actually 2 Asian American candidates vying for the aldermanic seat in that ward, and people were concerned, right, whether that would divide up the Asian American vote and so on. But I think that overall, it's just good to see more participation, good to see more engagement, and when folks can see themselves in these candidates, that is always a good thing.
I know you and I have talked about this quite frequently during the pandemic, after the pandemic, the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes across the country. Do you feel that the community is hearing enough from the candidates who are running to lead our city and the candidates who are running to lead the majority Asian American ward when it comes to that issue?
I think there is more concern about anti-Asian hate since the rise of anti-Asian hate. In general, it gets eclipsed by other issues. And I think that what we want to say is not that, we have it any worse than any other races. It's just that we want to be able to be heard and to be seen.
So we are likely looking at a runoff election. I know you were sitting here watching out as they were coming in. What would you like to see? What would you say the community would like to see for the candidates who are going to be in the runoff election before the next set of votes come in April?
I think for the Asian American community, we really would like the candidates to hear us, to come to our communities and hear the concerns of our communities. I know that in Chinatown, we're already planning a candidate forum for both the mayoral and the aldermanic races on the same day, so watch for invitations. But I think that we just want to be able to engage the community in this new way.
Grace Chan McKibben, Executive Director of the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community. Always nice to see you. Thanks for joining us here tonight. All right, back to you guys.
Well, ladies, thank you so much.
Some fascinating numbers there. Almost 30% increase in population since 2020 in the Asian community.
Growing.
Very, very nice interview there. there. Thanks so much, Judy, for that analysis as well. Learned a lot of information. And of course, one of the most watched, we've been talking about it for a long time now. It is in the 14th Ward in Chicago. This ward covering parts of Gage Park and Archer Heights. And the big story tonight, who is going to take the seat that was held by longtime Alderman Ed Burke.
Burke not seeking re-election as he faces a federal corruption trial set for this November. Only 2 candidates are competing in this race, and it looks like one is pulling away. 87% of precincts reporting.
For Helu Gutierrez at 64%, more than 2,400 votes cast. Paul Reyes at 36%. Tonight, Liz Nagy is live in the 14th. Liz, is happening there. Liz, what are you hearing tonight?
Well, Cheryl, those numbers that you just presented to give you an indication of why this party seems to be getting going here. This is sort of a joint election night celebration for Helu Gutierrez and Chuy Garcia, by Chuy Garcia, to make this 14th Ward Alderman position. And as you mentioned, there are 2 sort of history-making pieces, 2 historic elements to this election. For one, the 14th Ward will no longer be represented by Ed Burke. He has represented 14th voters since the late 1960s, and for the first time, regardless of who wins this race, either tonight or sometime this week, they will be represented by either a Latino American or a Latina American. This is a heavily Hispanic ward, so that's a very big deal for the voters here. We've now got a mariachi band on stage. There's some celebration starting to happen. I did speak with a representative from Helu Gutierrez's campaign earlier this evening. They were expecting her to arrive here tonight sometime around 8 o'clock, so we're waiting to see when she arrives and comes through the door. They expect her to be watching those returns here tonight. When I spoke with her campaign, they were feeling very hopeful. We did reach out to Raul Reyes. We were not able to get in touch with him. He's been very private about where he wanted to watch those results tonight, so we don't have a lot of insight into his campaign. He is a long-time Cook County clerk employee, but also backed by Ed Burke. That was certainly a big deal here. He said that he wanted to take over this ward because people, he said, didn't want any change from what Ed Burke has represented for them for more than 50 years now. So whatever happens in this election, there will be a historic element to it. Ed Burke will not be representing 14th Ward voters, and someone with a Hispanic background will be. So, Robin Jarrell, that's sort of what's going on here tonight. We're waiting to see what those numbers mean and when, and each we hear from Helu Gutierrez tonight.
54 years, the Dean of the City Council will no longer represent the 4th Ward. Liz Nagy reporting live tonight, and she will be there when history is made tonight in the 14th Ward
and
at
mariachis.
That celebration.
There are mariachis.
They are ready to celebrate there for sure. Now, Brandon Johnson's mayoral campaign has experienced a recent surge in the final weeks before this election.
He's sitting at number 2 as we continue to keep an eye on the votes coming in. Leah Hope standing by at Johnson's campaign headquarters with the latest for us. Hello, Leah.
We don't have any mariachis here, but we have some nice R&B on the side. And here at the Brandon Johnson campaign party, it is definitely filling in. Certainly with those numbers coming in, showing him second. People are coming in. People are celebratory. We just talked with his senior advisor for the campaign. He was playing it kind of cool and just saying that they knew that if they were slow and steady, doing an effective job of introducing Brandon to voters, that they would see who he was and who he was about. I mean, he's a cook commissioner, but he is not one of these career politicians that we have so many of and had so many of in Chicago. He's a Cook County commissioner. He's also a CTU, Chicago Teachers Union organizer, and he is essentially a teacher, the son of a pastor, and first and foremost, father of 4. From the West Side here in the Austin neighborhood. The name recognition issue, so important for a citywide campaign, as we know. So he was kind of coming in without that name recognition, and that was the obstacle to get his name recognition up. And when once people realize they know his name, then what is he about? Because obviously it's not just who you are, but what are you going to do for the residents of the city of Chicago. So Brandon Johnson, 47 years old, he's raising his family here on the west side. He had a busy day today talking to voters, and certainly he had a very strong ground campaign, and you see that here. You see a lot of folks who have been working on his campaign, and as I mentioned, we're here in the Austin neighborhood here on the west side, and Chicago is incredibly diverse, and you see a lot of diversity in this crowd. So he was doing the job of trying to meet people one-on-one and getting his message out, meeting at churches and community organizations. He was doing that today. What I thought interesting about today, busy election day, a lot to do. He had to vote. He had to make campaign stops, but he also had to make it to his son's basketball practice. So, you know, it's important to keep things in balance no matter where you are in life. So I thought that was interesting that he had that on his schedule, that he needed to make time for his family today, even on an election day. He does come from a big family, one of 10 siblings. So I don't know, maybe coming from a big family, maybe you're used to the rough and tumble of and disagreements, fighting her at City Hall and certainly at the Cook County Board. But he comes from a big family, a lot of people that he wanted to see today. Once he was done with his campaign stops, we understand that he's with his family right not too far from here, and he's going to be coming over here shortly. As I mentioned, his senior advisor, he said that they were confident going into today, if they did their job, that voters would see who Brandon Johnson was. We certainly are seeing that the voters of Chicago who turned out today and in their mail-in ballots did see Brandon Johnson, did hear his message, and now he is in second so far. We will certainly keep you posted and let you know when Brandon Johnson gets here. For now, we are live here on the west side in the Austin community. Leah Hope, ABC 7 Eyewitness News, back to you in the studio.
You know, R&B is all right, too, preferably old school. What we need to do is get all these candidates to give us a soundtrack.
Well, you know, sometimes an election can give you rhythm and blues, because that's what R&B stands for. You might get a little rhythm and blues from the Chicago election anytime.
It's going to be blues for a few people tonight. Remy Beshwal is keeping an eye on the numbers for us. Check back in with him to see what's going on. Hi, Remy.
Hey, Rob. Hey, Cheryl. Yeah, we need a soundtrack in here. You know, it'd be kind of fun to pipe some music in here. But you know what? There's definitely change in the air. There has to be some song that talks a little bit about this. Taking a look at these latest numbers again, mayor's race. We were just talking about Brandon Johnson just a moment ago, still holding about a 16,000 vote lead in terms of his position over Lori Lightfoot, holding on to that second spot for that runoff. But I want to go back a little bit. Just a moment ago, we had our guest with Judy talking about the war. We're talking a little bit about how the nature of the city has changed to the first Asian American majority ward, and that is all very true. Take a look at what is happening tonight in the 11th ward, and this may prove to be a little bit of a surprise, maybe telling us a little bit of the story of what is happening. So here's the 11th ward, the famous Bridgeport Daily home base forever in a day here in Chicago, and Anthony Cervino is leading tonight just by 16 votes at this hour over the incumbent Nicole Lee, who was appointed to this position in the 11th ward by the mayor. She, of course, the first Asian American alderperson in the Chicago City Council, to hold on to that seat. The first time that she's actually going to be facing the voters here to hold on to this seat in this very traditional seat that was part of, as I say, of the Daily machine, the home of it. There you can see here in Bridgeport as we take a look at it in terms of the city right there. This, I want to take a look at this from the previous election, though, in terms of the mayor's race. Now, if you go back to, come back to the other side here, if we go back to the mayor's race from 2019 and we see the 11th ward, take a look at who was doing so well that night in that very ward. That was Bill, of course, the brother of the former mayor and part of that political dynasty. Obviously, some of these issues around policing and around who do you want to have represent you, white politics versus Asian politics, what have you, it's not a done deal that this is necessarily going to always be an American ward. So that's what happened back then. And tonight you see back to here, we'll go back to the 11th ward tonight, you can see that Anthony Ciravino is leading just by a hair over Nicole Lee. And what does Anthony Ciravino do? He works for the Chicago Police Department. He's a trainer. He helps people who are on the force understand different communities and their different perspectives, and bringing in the mental health component to helping people who are out on the beats deal with people who are in crisis. So he's a trainer for the Chicago Police Department, and he's got a bit of a hair of a lead. Might be an indication of where we are going and how much change really is happening in these wards that are supposed to be all about change in the city of Chicago.
All right, Ravi, breaking all the numbers down for us, comparing 2019 to 2023. What a difference!
Oh, for so many
4 years makes.
For one particular candidate, Paul Vallis, it's just an incredible run from 9th place there to now making the runoff.
Yeah.
And the difference is because of what's happened in the city over the last 4 years. Crime is the most important issue for a reason. We've been through this pandemic. We've been through all the civil unrest. We've seen crime ebb and flow. We've always had crime, but of course it's now spread citywide. And I think that has changed through what the electorate is looking for.
Yeah, and Paul Vallis was very critical of Lightfoot, talking about the bridges being put up during the civil unrest, the schools being closed. There was a pandemic that the mayor had to deal with, of course. She was in talks with the CTU. The schools went on strike for 2 weeks during her tenure in the last 4 years. So there's been a lot going
of battles.
on, a lot of battles. It's a battle to get second place tonight, to get that spot on the 5th floor of City Hall. But we have 9 candidates, or 8 candidates take the present mayor. So it is getting interesting, and the numbers are coming in tonight. And we are seeing something that some would say was unexpected, while others said change was coming. We're talking about music. Sam Cooke, the famous song, "Change Is Gonna Come." It appears that is happening actually in the automatic wards, and the face and the city council of this city of Chicago is going to look very different from in years past.
We talked a little bit about union support for some of these candidates. Paul Vallis getting the FOP, Brandon Johnson, David, getting the CTU, which is an extremely powerful union in this city.
And going to be an even more powerful one if Brandon Johnson wins. And of course, a lot of this is about the future of schools in the city of Chicago and who will control the elected school board, which will start to roll in during the term of the mayor, who is elected probably in a runoff next month. Or in a couple months. It really is changing the face of politics in the city. The CTU is so far having a good night, given how well Brandon Johnson is doing.
And you're going to see that'd be a major campaign issue if it ends up being Johnson Vallis. How much control will the CTU have over Brandon Johnson, and will the CTU really be running the city? That's something Vallis is going to hammer at.
They're about that, and we don't even know who the runoff candidates are.
Right. But we're going to take a quick pause to join our television audience, and we'll see on the other side of a break.
From ABC 7 Eyewitness News, this is a Vote 2023 election update.
And good evening, everybody. We are getting a clearer idea of who will square off in the April 4th runoff for mayor of Chicago.
The Associated Press projecting that Paul Vallis will be one of those 2 finalists, with 87% of precincts reporting Vallis with a big lead. Look at your screen. Right now, Brandon Johnson appears to be edging out incumbent Lori Lightfoot for that coveted second spot.
So let's move to some of the hotly contested aldermanic races. In the 11th Ward, Alderwoman Nicole Lee is neck and neck with Anthony Ciaravino. Lee was an appointment, of course, of Mayor Lloyd Lightfoot.
Cheryl, another appointment of the mayor is in serious trouble. If the current margin holds, Julia Ramirez would defeat 12th Ward Alderwoman Annabelle Albarca. Hope you can join us on our stream. We're just getting started at 8:23. We got a lot more to go.
You can always track the results and watch our continuous coverage on our website or wherever you stream.
It's time to take a look at the mayor's race for the city of Chicago. 7% reporting. Paul Vallis, Associated Press, said will make the runoff. He's got 35% of the vote, 153,747. Brandon Johnson and 20%. Lori Lightfoot, the incumbent mayor, is at 16%. 9 candidates in this race.
Yeah, Jesus Chuy Garcia with more than 59,000 votes cast for him with 14% of the vote. Willie Wilson tonight with 9%, nearly 40,000 votes cast for him. And Jamal Green at 2% with nearly 8,800 votes.
With 2%, just over 8,000 votes, and Sophia King at 1%, also Roderick Sawyer at 1% of the vote. So Paul Vallis is in. Now we wait to see who's number 2.
It's the battle for the second position, of course, but in Chicago's 45th Ward on the city's northwest side, incumbent Jim Gardner is trying to keep his seat after affirmed by several controversies. 5 candidates running against the incumbent tonight. Of course, tonight with 90% reporting so far tonight. Jim Gardner with 49%, more than 6,300 votes cast for him. Megan Matthias at 2,054 votes, and James Suh with almost 2,000 votes.
Here's the second page. Susanna Ernst with 12%, and Ana Santoyo with 5%, and Maria Tomic with 4%. So look, this may be secure for the 45th Ward alderman.
But there were some controversies with the text messaging, and he had to make some apologies, and he did before the city council. So we'd like to talk about that. Apparently these text messages are not affecting some of the people who are running tonight that are controversial with the text messages, because tonight Jim Gardner is very far ahead of his competitors tonight.
I think the whole text message thing got a little bit muddled in the case of Paul Vallis, where at first it looked like somebody he said on his campaign did it, and then it looked like somebody was hacked his account. And so maybe text messages overall, people have lost confidence. It's hard to explain exactly why that would be shrugged off in the way that it looks to be right now.
Lord, did you expect this to just be a little closer as we look at those numbers?
No, I mean, actually, in terms of the actual numbers, I'm not sure, but the trend, the polls for the last, and we complain a lot about polls, and we know some polls are better than others, but the trend for several weeks has been right along these lines.
Yeah, if you look at them, certainly for the mayoral race, they look to reflect what the polls were. Christian Peak goes live with the latest on the aldermanic race we were just talking about here, the 45th Ward. Let's get the latest from him.
Hey, Rob and Cheryl, as you guys have been talking about, Alderman Jim Gardner seems to be in a very strong position based off what the polls right now have been saying. But of course, he is no stranger to controversy. He's been accused, of course, of allegedly intimidating and harassing his opponents and critics, reportedly withholding ward services and using derogatory language to describe another alderman's female chief of staff, which he has apologized for. Now, he is under investigation by the Chicago Board of Ethics as well as federal investigators. His constituents, actually, and council members have called on Gardner to resign amid the scandals. This would be his second term if he is elected. Now, as you guys have been discussing right now, he is sitting in a strong position with 49% of the vote so far, with 80% of the precincts reporting. He's already accrued nearly 6,400 votes, followed by Megan Mathias with 16%, James Sue with 15%, Susanna Ernst with 12%, Anna Santoya with 5%, and Tomik with 4% right here. So obviously he is in a strong position to be reelected. Personally, going into this, I think this might actually lead to some sort of runoff, considering how many candidates are in this race as well. Now, we have also reached out to Alderman Gardner just to comment, or just to get a little bit more comment on where he is sitting right now, based off what the polls are saying about his chances of being reelected, but we have not yet heard back. We're reporting live from the northwest side. Christian Picos, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
With the way the results are coming, Christian, I think we hear back from his campaign tonight. Businessman Willie Wilson is running for mayor of Chicago once again.
So let's check in with Karen Jordan. She is live at Wilson's camp headquarters. The latest there. Karen, how's it going?
Hi, Cheryl. I think you just were tossing to me. It's very lively right here now at Willie Wilson's campaign headquarters. You know, if his support base during his first two mayoral campaigns was majority black wards on the south and west sides, well, this time around, he has a decidedly diverse group of supporters here at his campaign headquarters at the Swiss Hotel. Cross-section of the city, Black, Latino, Asian, Eastern European supporters, people who say Wilson gets their vote for leading Chicago's top office. Now, earlier today, we were following Wilson around the city. He did say, we were telling you that Wilson has actually never held a public office, despite multiple attempts at doing so. As 7 black candidates, the 74-year-old millionaire businessman will be hard-pressed to make the runoff by only winning majority black wards. And if tonight is an indication, Wilson has been successful in making inroads into different communities. Still, Wilson says despite what tonight's returns may indicate, he will wait before making a decision about his campaign until more mail-in ballots are counted.
I'm the only candidate that's really not bought. To me, I'm going from the heart. I think everything you don't quite know what's what. Always in your mind. It never was. I think it's a wait and see, so particularly with the mail-in ballot.
So Wilson is here at the Swiss Hotel. He's upstairs watching the returns. He will come down in about 10 minutes to address his supporters to say thank you for their support. That is the latest here at the Swiss Hotel. Karen Jordan, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
Okay, Karen, thank you. Someone always accessible. Willie Wilson never has said no. He's always talked to us when we want an interview. We want to bring our analysts back in. Laura, I guess I'll ask you, he's run a lot. Why doesn't Willie Wilson stick with Chicago, with the voters?
Why doesn't he stick? Well, I think probably because he has a narrow base. I think it's true that he's been trying to reach out to other communities, but he's a relatively conservative politician. He ran for president in the Republican Party in 2016. So he's kind of out of step, I think, with a lot of Chicago voters, but people love him. He's a character. He's so generous, and he's really stepped up his giveaways, the gas giveaways, the grocery giveaways. And so he's got that 10% or so solid base of support, people who admire him and love him, but it's not enough to be elected.
That was notable. Gas prices were the highest they've been in this country in a long time. He gave it away.
Yeah,
millions.
Millions
of dollars.
Yeah, and groceries, vouchers for groceries. He spent really self-funded campaign, $6 million this campaign, and he does that with every time he ran for U.S. Senate as well. Doesn't really have a correlation. The more you spend, you win, because he spent more money than any of the other candidates in this race. However, his positioning and how it's coming out is not voting as well.
Well, I think that even though he's been a very successful business person, there's a big question as to whether or not he could run a government. And we've seen the existing mayor, Mary Lord Lightfoot, having a difficult time with that transition. So they're probably just raises the question in people's mind. On top of that, his stance on law and order issues was a pretty hard line. The comment he made about running
Chasing them down.
offender down a rabbit hole is something that it's hard to unsay that. And once it's said, and I would guess that with might naturally have been part of his constituency, he may have lost some votes there. That comment probably also appealed to many others as well.
Well, he got all of the votes for Lori Lightfoot. The people who voted for him in the primaries, they tended to vote for Lori Lightfoot in the election. He then supported Lori Lightfoot in 2019, only to say that was a big mistake for him. So now going forward, depending on, are people really concerned about who he endorses? It seems to be very important who he will endorse.
Absolutely. He was a kingmaker last time in terms of helping Lori Lightfoot make the African American community. That's his base. He's going to be able to do that again. His endorsement is going to be highly sought after.
Can we talk a little bit about Johnson and Lightfoot here? And it's close. I mean, as you see some returns we're showing you, it is very close. As we wait for about 99,000 votes to come in, the mail-in ones that arrive today, that the Board of Elections will get to in the coming days or week, we hope. Do you see that favoring one of those particular candidates or the other?
Well, they're not only just arriving today, but arriving in the next several days because they just have to be postmarked today.
Right.
So it's going to take a while. We don't know where those votes are coming from. If you think that they're going to follow the trend what we're tonight, then probably Lightfoot is not going to be able to prevail. But we have no idea. We can't estimate. We just know how many are going to be out. And, you know, maybe the two second-tier people are not going to want to concede because they're going to want to make sure they get counted.
And you talked about how close it is, Rob. There could be a recount. They could sue for a recount if they're very close with the number 2 and 3 position. So it could be days, maybe weeks, shall I say, because we started off tonight saying it's been going well.
Well, the Board of Elections has said that they believe, given the pace at which they can count and what their expectations are, that maybe by the weekend we might know.
Okay.
So let's keep our fingers crossed.
I was optimistic. No, Laura and David, stay with us. 4th and 6th wards, we're keeping an eye on those, and our John Garcia is live with a little bit more on that. Check in with John. John, how are you?
Doing well, Rob. You know, we are in the IBEW hall, which serves as kind of a workroom for candidate, Lamont Robinson. Pardon me. He all of his folks were here just a little bit ago, and then they left to go to the party. But let's hear, they believe me, are celebrating tonight. They were very excited. We watched as they were reading the initial results and jumping up and down because Mr. Robinson is holding a lead, a strong lead at this point. He's hovering near the 49%, 48% range where he could potentially, if he gets over the 50%, avoid a runoff in this race. And there are 7 other candidates in this race, all of them fighting to try to succeed Alderwoman Sophia King, who is not running for re-election because she is running for mayor of Chicago. Robinson has been a state representative. He's got a number of very impressive endorsements from Senator Tammy Duckworth to Governor Pritzker to Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle. He says economic development would be his #1 priority if elected alderman.
That we can move the 4th Ward forward with the experience that I have as a state rep, the experience that I have as an educator and a small business owner. It is really what the ward needs in order for us to move this historic ward forward. Home of President Barack Obama, home of Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle.
So with a little more than 82% of the vote in right now, Robinson is holding at 47%. In second place is Prentice Butler, who serves as chief of staff for Alderwoman Sophia King. He would be in the rough if Robinson continues to fall short of that 50% threshold. For now, live in the Bronzeville neighborhood, John Garcia, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you guys.
Very close. One to watch for us tonight. John, thank you for that update. And of course, we've been talking about numbers all night. We got a report about 55%. The largest turnout was in the Beverly neighborhood. So let's go live now. Our team investigative reporter Chuck Gowdy is live at the Board of Elections tonight. And Chuck, we've been focusing on those 199,000 votes, mail-in votes that could come in tonight that they count by the end of the weekend.
Cheryl, that's correct. In fact, that's the two things I was going to tell you that officials here at the Chicago Election Center are now focusing on, that the voting is done here today. The polls closing at 7 o'clock. They're counting those votes. And so the authorities here are looking at two things: the 99,000 votes that are still potentially out, ballots that are out and that could be mailed in and still counted. And then they're also looking at the runoff election that is preparing for 5 weeks from now in early April. I talked a couple of minutes ago with the Chicago Board of Elections spokesman, Max Bieber.
We don't expect all of those 100,000 vote-by-mail ballots to be coming back today and the immediate days after the election, but we do expect maybe about 60 to 80 vote-by-mail ballots have returned after Election Day. But everything that we received today, both by the drop boxes and in the mail, won't start to be processed and counted until tomorrow morning.
And they'll be counted for how long?
Until March 14th. Election code gives us until March 14th to count all late arriving but properly postmarked vote-by-mail ballots, as well as all provisional ballots that were cast on Election Day today.
Turnout likely to end up about 34 to 36%, according to election officials, but the age demographic that makes up that turnout is important. About half of the votes today were age 55 to 65, some older than that. Younger voters, 18 to 24, making up a minuscule portion of today, just a little more than 3% of the ballots cast by that 18 to 24-year-old demographic. And so now into April 4th, 5 weeks from today, where all of this will be done again. The only difference, there will be 2 candidates for mayor.
Chuck, quick question. I don't know if you really answer this. Of those 99,000 votes out, can the Board of Elections pinpoint where they were sent out? Like, would we be able to know what wards are included in those outstanding votes?
Well, they would certainly be able to do that if they wanted to break it out that way. I'm not sure that is as important to them as it is to us and potentially the candidates, Rob, but clearly they could break that out and figure it out. They know how many ballots were sent out and which ones have been returned.
All right, very good information, Chuck. We'll be watching this all night long and, of course, all week. We're going to go live now to Willie Wilson's campaign headquarters. Karen Jordan is standing by live with the mayoral candidate who's walking out to talk to his supporters. Karen.
There's Willie Wilson. You can see in the crowd. He is going to address his supporters as he walks up to the podium here. Will be our first of the 9 candidates to speak publicly. Let's listen to what Willie Wilson has to say tonight.
He can sing now. You might sing for you in a few minutes. We're talking about earlier the tunes we like. He is an excellent singer. So who knows? He's accompanied by his wife, who calls him a visionary. Her name's Jeanette. The married 74-year-old philanthropist and very successful businessman who sells medical supplies. He donated a lot of his money to gas and groceries for people during the pandemic. Very critical of Mayor Lori Lightfoot during the campaign and during her tenure as well. However, he did support her in the 2019 election, but tonight he might be singing a different tune.
We talked about Garcia's son and the advertising that he did around him being part of a gang. Willie Wilson's son, who was murdered some years ago, and that became a prominent campaign.
That was part of his testimony and his campaign ads. And Willie Wilson, as we said, spent more than $6 million, mostly self-funding his campaign. And a lot of those commercials, he did talk about that. He did say if he won, he would fire the present police chief, Superintendent David Brown, if he won, as did several other candidates in this.
Every one of them.
You were mentioning earlier, Willie could sing, too.
Yeah.
He was maybe going to sing the end of that song. We want to listen to it.
A gospel program that comes on Sunday morning.
Yes, he does.
It's on a spectacular show.
Sensation, I think that might be the name of it. Yes. Born and raised in Louisiana, and made his way here to Chicago. He's had a very successful business with his medical supply company, formerly owning several McDonald's. He donated masks during the pandemic to Mount Sinai Hospital, of course.
I always love these live, because we're watching this live with you. And some of the candidates or politicians will go right up there and start talking. And then others will take their time, like Willie Wilson. He wants to get his notes together. He wants to make sure his prepared remarks are ready to go. And he wants to get his supporters encouraged and ready to hear what he has to say.
He did say he would donate his salary if he won $16,000 to church and nonprofit organizations. He's getting ready. It looks like he's gearing up. Jeanette giving him words of encouragement.
Given how far behind he is, it's like a pretty festive night.
He's all smiles there.
You know, he's a faith-based man. He's a faith-based man. He always believes better days are coming.
There we go.
Good times are on the other side of any defeat because he's a faith-based man.
And he's also a generous man, so I suspect he put on a pretty good party. As people,
We
people are happy to be there.
We're going to cut away from Willie Wilson and go to Lori Lightfoot, I'm told. We're going to cut away from big news here. It looks like incumbent Mayor Lori Lightfoot is about to address her supporters. We're hearing she may concede to Brandon Johnson. We need to listen in.
Advancing to the runoffs. We were fierce competitors. And these last few months, but I will be rooting and praying for our next mayor to deliver for the people of the city for years to come. Thank you. 4 years ago, I looked into the camera and spoke directly to young people of color who look like me, and to every kid who felt like I did when I grew up. And I'm going to do that again tonight. I told you back then that anything is possible with hard work. I want you to know that no matter what happens along the way, you should always believe that, because it's true. Believe that you can bring about change. Believe that you matter. And believe that you can love who you want to love and do what you want to do and be who you want to be. You will not be defined by how you fall. You will be defined by how hard you work and how much you do good for other people. Obviously, we didn't win the election today, but I sit here with my head high and a heart full of gratitude. I am grateful to the millions of Chicagoans who came together as we made tough decisions, saw the struggles of our frontline workers, and beat back a deadly pandemic. I'm grateful that we worked together to remove a record number of guns off our streets, reduce homicides, and started making real progress on public safety. I'm grateful that we were able to connect youth to mental health services, housing, education, job training, and legal services. I'm extraordinarily proud that we made investments in communities that have been neglected for decades with Invest Southwest. And putting over $2.2 billion into communities in our neighborhoods. That commitment simply must continue. And I'm proud of the fact that we will deliver on the city's largest ever investments in affordable housing. And to achieve record investment in our schools, adding school social workers, nurses, and special education case managers. And you better believe I am grateful that we took on the machine and entrenched forces that held this city back for far too long. And regardless of tonight's outcome, we fought the right fights and we put this city on a better path. No doubt about it. Now, as we all know in life, in the end, you don't always win every battle, but you never regret taking on the powerful and bringing in the light. To my friends across the country and my fellow mayors, never fear being brave and bold. I have always believed that war closes, another one opens, and so it will be for me and Amy and Viv. Thank you to my family for inspiring me. My love of my wife, our daughter, and the rest of my family grows and grows, and they have always stood by me through thick and thin, and tonight is no different. Thank you, honey. Thank you. Thank you to our campaign team, the best in the business, no doubt. And I want to say a special thanks to our incredible volunteers who did tremendous work connecting us with voters and making the case for me every day all over this city. We love you. And to my friends in organized labor, thanks for your commitments and support. Being with me and being together on the battles that we fought on behalf of working Chicagoans. That work must continue. I am honored to have been a partner in the work, which, as I said, must continue. I'm eternally grateful to everyone who gave us their time, support, and money and prayers. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. God bless you. God bless this incredible city. It's an honor of a lifetime to be mayor. There's more work to do, and I just want to say thank you all deeply, deeply from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Thank you.
Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot has conceded her bid for re-election. This came at about 8:45, spoke just for about 5 minutes. Here's the results looking at right now. 91% of precincts reported. Paul Vallis with 35% of the vote. Brandon Johnson at 20%, and Lori Lightfoot there at 16%.
And Jesus Chuy Garcia with 14%, with more than 63,000 votes cast for him. Willie Wilson, 9% with 41,000 votes cast, and Jamal Green with 2% of the vote.
And rounding out the 9 candidates, Cam Buckner at 2%, Sophia King at 1%, and Roderick Sawyer at 1% as well. We're going to continue our coverage streaming wherever you get us there on your connected TV apps or on abcchicago.com.
Back everybody to our very special election coverage here, streaming at abc7chicago.com. We just had a concession speech from the incumbent mayor, Lori Lightfoot, the 56th mayor of the city of Chicago. She made history when she became the first openly gay African-American woman to be the leader of the city of Chicago from Massillon, Ohio. And now she becomes making history again as the first mayor, not the first incumbent not to win for re-election. ABC 7 political reporter Craig Wall is live tonight at Mayor Lightfoot's headquarters. And Craig, what is the mood there and what is everybody saying?
You know, obviously there is a real sense of despondency here. There was hopefulness going in that Mayor Lightfoot was going to be able to rally, but as the numbers started coming in through the night, it seemed like a lot of people who might have been here, they were expecting a packed house, they might have been watching returns from somewhere else and waiting to come here to see if the numbers for Lori Lightfoot could have rallied. You know, we heard from her, you could see and sense a sense of despondency on her part. I wouldn't say she got emotional, but see she was downcast in her spirit. You know, she talked about how they, fought the right fight, and when one door closes, another opens. Back to you guys.
All right, Craig, thank you so much.
Before I came to the hall,
Paul Vallis speaking. Let's listen in.
and please listen. And please listen to me carefully. Before I came to the hall, before I came to the hall, I received a call from Mayor Lightfoot congratulating me on being in the runoff. Let's give her a round of applause, because it takes a lot of courage to run for mayor, and it's one of the toughest jobs. So I want to congratulate her on her service. Please, let's give her a round of applause. Well, let me just tell you, I haven't been this happy since my son returned from Afghanistan. And I want to thank you all, old friends and new, for joining this campaign. It's because of you we are in the second round. And I want to thank the voters of Chicago for making this campaign about the issues and nothing but the issues. I'm running for mayor to bring to the city the type of leadership the city needs. It's not a solo act. In all of my great public service challenges, from director under Mayor Daley to running the Chicago Public Schools when Bill Clinton called the schools a model for the nation, to going to Philadelphia, to rebuilding an entire school system in New Orleans after Katrina, to the work that I have done abroad. To the work that I have done abroad in earthquake-ravaged Haiti and Chile. I've had success because I've always had the good sense to listen to the community, to empower the community, and draw my leadership from the community. Public safety is the fundamental right of every American. It is a civil right. And it is the principal responsibility of government. And we will have a safe Chicago. We will make Chicago the safest city in America. And it will not only come from providing the police with the resources and the support they need, but from building the bond between the police department and the community. So we have true community policing in the greatest sense of the word. Because the police are only as effective as the community that they work with. And I will support our law enforcement officers, but I will also support and have a zero tolerance when it comes to violating the law or an institution. And this is coming from a family of 4 police officers, including my wife. Look, public safety is the overriding issue, but we will not have public safety in this city until the schools become part of the public safety solution. And that means we need to have the type of educational quality and educational opportunity so that we can provide for a future for all of Chicago's residents, regardless of their income, regardless of their zip codes. And that means that our schools need to be returned to the community. The money needs to follow back into the community. And our schools need to be open through the evening, through the weekends, during the holidays, through the summer. And we need to bring the community into the schools, the faith-based organizations into the schools, the park districts into the schools, so we have programs and supports for our children, and we can keep them in safe and secure environments. And finally, I will not be a successful mayor. I will not be a successful mayor until I reverse the generations of disinvestment in Chicago's ports communities. And there is a pathway to accomplish that, which I have articulated for this generation. No more promises. We need to deliver. Because if our city is to grow and prosper, if our city is to grow the middle class and keep the middle class, we have got to invest in those communities that have long been neglected. And we have to invest so that we are helping those individuals within those communities secure ownership and accumulate wealth. That's what local empowerment is about. So ultimately, that will be on my epitaph, because we need to address the underlying causes of the problems that the city faces, and we have to invest in those long neglected communities. I am a lifelong Democrat. And for some of you who remember, one of the most dynamic progressive legislators, Dawn Clark Netsch, she was my mentor and my boss and my friend for 2 decades. And she taught me the importance of protecting a woman's right to choose. And she gave me an appreciation of supporting and respecting communities. This is why, when I ran for Orvish in 2020, I supported marriage equality when they called it gay marriage. You cannot erase the record. Public service is in my DNA. I am the grandson of Greek American immigrants. 6 of our veterans, including my 2 sons and my father. I am the first of 2 police officers, one who has become a firefighter because he needs a more predictable work schedule. I've told people when they say, how hard are you working? I said, well, I'm almost working as hard as our rank and file police officers. But also, 2 firefighters in our family and 3 teachers. We are a family of public servants. I have never thought of doing anything else. My pledge to you is that I'm running for mayor to be the mayor of all Chicago. People tell me that this used to be the city that works and it doesn't work anymore. I'll tell you, this city has never really been the city that works for everyone, but it will be when I am mayor. So tomorrow, I'm on the road, early morning, 5 weeks to the finish line. I said I was going to run an issue-oriented campaign, and nothing's going to stop me. But I can't do it without your help. Are you with me? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to say this, God bless each and every one of you for participating in this journey. Let's stay vigilant. We've got 5 weeks to go, and with your help, we will be successful. And I want to say this. I want to thank my wife for sacrificing her life to my career choices. I'll give her a as soon as I complete my remarks. That's right. But thank you so much. God bless each and every one of you. And I'll see you at the finish line.
The campaign runoff has begun. Yeah, there's Paul Vallas, Associated Press. Speaking of officials, Cheryl, now has called it Paul Vallas versus Brandon Johnson in the runoff to become the next mayor of Chicago. Vallas there clearly had his talking points down. Mayor Lightfoot, a lot just happened in the last half hour. Yeah. Lightfoot conceded, and so it looks like now we have the runoff candidates.
Yeah, so let's bring in our analyst tonight. Laura, what are your thoughts? It's 9 o'clock. We thought this was going to take a lot longer.
Didn't really, I really didn't think that was going to happen as quickly as it did. First, your thoughts on Mayor Lightfoot's concession speech.
Well, I thought very graceful. I thought she hit on the points that she wanted to hit on in terms of her own accomplishments. She said that, I think she said, it might have been off camera, that she said that she wished the next mayor up in the world. She knows better than anyone how tough that job is, particularly at that time. The thing that strikes me, the reason she came down, I think part of it was policing crime and public safety, which was supposed to have been her strength. When she ran the first time, she ran because she had been the head of the police board. She'd been the head of the police accountability task force that helped put together the consent decree, and that ended up being her biggest weakness. And of course, she came in as a reformer, anti-corruption mayor. That's not where the city is right now in terms of what the big issues are. The big issue now is public safety and crime, and that was where she really failed.
Well, we'll see what happens in the next 5 weeks. Judy Su standing by with more analysis for us tonight. Judy.
Yeah, you guys, I'm just sitting here chatting with my guest. Let's get to her right now and talking about this mayoral race. The first time in a long time the city of Chicago not re-electing an incumbent. Oh, excuse me. Let me introduce Twyla. We've been here chatting. Twyla Blackman-Larnell, Associate Professor of Political Science at Loyola University Chicago. She is also a faculty affiliate of the Institute of Racial Justice. Your thoughts right now, 8:45 tonight, Lightfoot conceding.
At 8:30, it was still a really big toss-up. We're sitting here talking about how close Lori Lightfoot and Chuy Garcia was. Lori Lightfoot wasn't that far behind Brandon Johnson, and within a matter of minutes, we went from one concession speech to so many others. And this is pretty exciting. I'm automatically thinking about the runoff elections now, right? It's going to be super competitive as we see that right now. If we think about the number of people who voted for Brandon Johnson, Lori Lightfoot, Wilson, and the several other candidates as well, now they have to pick and choose who they want to associate themselves with. And it's going to be really interesting because Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallas are running on two of the same issues, really big for all Chicagoans: education and crime and public safety. But Brandon Johnson has a little bit more to his agenda, right? And that's police reform. So in the runoff election, we are going to see everybody in the city, Black, Latino, Asian, low income, higher income, et cetera, are all concerned about crime. But the individuals that are belonging to the racialized groups and lower income, they're also concerned about police reform. And I think that's going to be what is going to distinguish Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson in this upcoming runoff election. Because people have to pick now. They only have 2 candidates. There's not that many to pick from anymore. And people are really going to align themselves with the one candidate who they think will have the biggest impact on their individual lives and their communities. And it's going to be pretty interesting to see how voters of these other candidates line themselves up during the runoff elections.
2 other things we were discussing all night is about the voter turnout.
Yes.
You were surprised and sad
I'm very
with
sad.
the voter turnout.
Yeah, because this is supposed to be a pretty historic election, and it's kind of surprising that only 32% of Chicagoans turned out to vote. It's pretty on par with previous elections, actually. I really did think that we would get up to 45% or so, because there's been so much mobilization in all of the communities, but especially amongst young people, which we heard earlier. They only accounted for 3% of the people who turned out today, and that really hurt my heart, because those are the folks who are the future of Chicago, and they are the ones who have, I believe, the most at stake, especially as it relates to schools and crime and police reform and economic development and job opportunity. So I'm really hoping that they take these next couple of weeks very seriously and again figure out which candidate is best for the young people of Chicago and the future of Chicago.
And they will turn out in bigger numbers
In
for the
bigger
actual
numbers,
runoff
yes.
election that's coming in April. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on education when it comes to this next runoff election in April. We have Paul Vallas, of course, a former CEO of CPS.
Yes.
We have a former teacher who is backed by the teachers union. Your thoughts on all of that?
So Paul Vallas has a pretty extensive history when it comes to, as he mentioned, being a public servant in public education and leading a major public school system, Chicago, Philadelphia, also mentioned New Orleans after Katrina. However, Brandon Johnson is a teacher, a black male teacher in the city of Chicago, born and raised in the city of Chicago, has children in Chicago, family in Chicago. He's pretty relatable to many of the black and Latino families who send their kids to Chicago public schools. People have to remember that Chicago public schools are overwhelmingly black and Latino. I'm talking 90%, okay? There are very few schools where we see more than 20 to 25% of students being white. So a lot of people who actually are wanting to see education reform don't actually send their kids to Chicago public schools. The folks who are going to be supporting Brandon Johnson are actually sending their children to Chicago public schools, and they really have, again, pretty high stakes in the game, because as we know, Chicago public schools has some pretty big challenges facing them now and going forward in the future.
Appreciate your insight, Professor Larnell. Come back and see us in April.
Always.
We'll be watching
Thank
this
you.
together again. All right,
Very
thanks
exciting.
again. Back to you guys.
Very interesting, because of course Brandon Johnson was endorsed by the Charter Union, American Federation of Teachers, and the SEIU. And Professor Twyla said something very important. African American male in the Chicago public school system, very rare, not a lot of teachers in the system. And Paul Vallas, of course, the former CEO of Chicago Public Schools. And I noticed on the stage behind them, I saw a lot of former teachers and principals on the stage behind Paul Vallas who are supporting him. So that is going to be an interesting component, how they split the teacher supporting vote.
Well, absolutely. And to this point, Paul Vallas has focused so much on crime and policing. And now this campaign will almost certainly pivot at least those on the table, and it's quite a juxtaposition of Brandon Johnson, who comes out of the CTU, a very liberal person, Paul Vallas, who will be promoting charter schools. He made reference to the money should follow the student. That language means even vouchers, which would be a very significant move, and it will be something that will be debated during this campaign, and certainly Brandon Johnson will hammer away at that issue, because that's something that more liberal-minded people really reject, both vouchers and charter schools.
We haven't heard from Mr. Johnson just yet. Our Mark Rivera is out with Chuy Garcia's campaign, has spoken to the campaign. We want to get the latest from him there. Mark?
Yeah, Rob and everyone in the studio, you can hear it probably right now. It is a very festive environment. Multiple live bands here in Little Village tonight as we wait for Chuy Garcia to come into his campaign party. I was told, though, interestingly, even though this race has been called by the AP for Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallas to be in this runoff election on April 4th, I was told by a senior advisor to Chuy Garcia that he will not be conceding tonight, that he is going to see how the votes that are still out there in the form of mail-in ballots, how they actually come in and whether that can propel him past one of the two of them to get into that runoff. So that's an interesting difference that we've seen from the Garcia campaign so far. Obviously, we are still waiting to hear from the candidate himself, having had the race called for both of those candidates to be in the runoff. So that may change things in the next hour or so here, but we are still waiting for him to arrive. Obviously, a very festive event again, and obviously a lot going on here. So I'm just going to send it on back to you all and take a listen to this.
There's still 100,000 ballots that are left to be discounting the outcome. We've already had a very successful night. We've helped elect a series of aldermanic candidates across the city, so we feel very good about the results of today. Absolutely not. It would be a disservice to everybody whose ballot has not been counted yet.
So you hear there, it would be a disservice to all of those people who still haven't had their ballots counted yet. That is what the Garcia campaign is saying at this point. We will hear from the candidate himself once he arrives. We are still waiting for that, and we'll bring you his speech as soon as we have it. Back to you in the studio.
Okay, Mark, it's an interesting play because the candidate who leads him, current Mayor Lori Lightfoot, has conceded and even made a phone call to Paul Vallas.
Right before, but we'll see what happens. The night is still young.
This is true.
Paul Vallas, of course, has continued momentum in this race. We've been talking about it for the last 2 weeks.
We want to go to Sarah Schulte, who is there. We heard Mr. Vallas speak, and Sarah's joining us live with more. Sarah?
Rob, as you mentioned at the beginning of Paul Vallas' speech, he said that he did receive a phone call from Lori Lightfoot. He also thanked her at the same time for her public service. Vallas mentioned in his speech that he is the son of Greek immigrants, that public service is in his DNA. Besides what he has done as the former Chicago Public Schools CEO, also a budget director for under Mayor Daley, he also has teachers in his family, firefighters, and police officers. He said this is something that just, in part, again, his DNA. Now, one thing that Paul Vallas did do on this election, which he didn't do 4 years ago when he ran for mayor, he really did laser focus on one issue. And of course, we know that one issue was public safety and crime, probably the #1 issue for residents here in Chicago. And he certainly talked a lot about public safety tonight in a very feisty speech where he said public safety is a civil right. He also spoke a lot about education. Obviously, that is his background. He wants schools, Chicago Public Schools, to become part of the community again. He plans on keeping those schools open after school and on weekends. He also talked about disinvestment in poor neighborhoods and how that really needs to change, and how he says he's going to do something about it. At the end of the speech, of course, he said this is not done. We need everyone's help in this room to go to the finish line. This is what he said.
I want to thank you all, old friends and new, for joining the campaign. It's because of you we are in the second round. And I want to thank the voters of Chicago for making this campaign about the issues and nothing but the issues. I am running there to bring to the city the type of leadership the city needs.
Now, during the campaign, Mayor Light, other candidates tried to paint Paul Vallas as a Republican based on some of the things that he has said during interviews in his past. The one thing Vallas made a point to tonight is that he is a lifelong pro-choice Democrat. You're probably going to hear him say a lot of that during the next 5 weeks as he goes into the runoff. Live at Fulton Market, Sarah Schulte, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
Yes, Sarah, been at City Hall all night, the venue where Paul Vallas, of course, chose, and you told us the backstory, but sometimes manifestation happens in the different places. So, Sarah, thank you for that update tonight. As you said, Paul Vallas was very gracious to Lori Lightfoot because she knows what's ahead of either one of the candidates who does win this campaign. Talk about how very different Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson are. We're still waiting. Leah Hope standing by at his campaign. He was doing something special with his family tonight because he said it was real important on this night to complete that. But let's talk about both of you, how different these campaigns will be and how different these candidates are.
Well, you've got polar opposites, I think, when you're looking at political ideology. Brandon Johnson is a liberal, perhaps even left liberal candidate. He comes from the west side of Chicago. I don't think there's ever been a serious African-American candidate from the west side of Chicago before. He is much more grassroots, and he has a different perspective on public safety. Now he was accused during the campaign of being behind or supportive of the defund the police movement, which he is pulled back from, but he clearly doesn't see, he is not a conservative when it comes to policing. And when you look at Paul Vallas, he's on the exact opposite side. He's much more establishment. He is a Democrat. He's not a Republican as he's been painted, but he certainly is a conservative Republican.
Well, his speech tonight, David, as we were listening to that, he made that clear, bringing up gay rights, also bringing up a woman's right to choose. He's hit back immediately on some of the things some of his defectors say that he believes in. He wanted to make a point of standing by those two issues, in addition, as you mentioned, crime and community safety.
Yes, absolutely. And another big area of this campaign will be about the economic plans that the two of them have. And Paul Vallas, while liberal, he plans to use some market-based techniques like a land bank and a community investment authority that would help drive investment to the west side. Brandon Johnson, traditional liberal, wants to tax the wealthy, wants to tax his way out of Chicago's economic problems and then send some of that money back to the communities, wanting a head tax, wanting a commuter tax, wanting to tax an income tax for people earning more than $100,000. And so their approaches to fixing the city's economic problems, especially the problems of economic disparity, are completely different from each other.
All right, we are continuing to discuss this all night, but Judy Sue is with another analyst for us tonight. Judy?
Yeah, you guys, I want to talk a little bit more about the younger vote. We've a little bit about that with Professor Larnell earlier, and now I'm joined by somebody who really worked very hard in driving the younger votes out, although you are also disappointed listening to the number of the younger votes between 18 and 24 who actually turned out to vote. This is Katrina Fidd from Chicago Votes. So first of all, tell everybody a little bit more about Chicago Votes.
Chicago Votes is a nonpartisan organization. We're a nonprofit in the city, and we were founded with a pretty simple mission, and it's just to break down barriers young people face to civic engagement, and that includes voting, and just to make sure that Chicago is a space where young people's needs are heard and valued at the same level as other voters as well.
So your reaction in hearing that less than 3%, I think, was the number of voters between 18 and 24 years old actually turned out to vote in this election?
It's disappointing for sure. I have been in the community with fellow organizers, young people, and I've seen so much mobilization efforts led by young people. We've had forums hosted by Good Kids Mad City. Chicago Votes has been parading high schoolers to go vote, hosting events, and it's disappointing for sure, but I think there are a number of reasons for this, and it's not a new problem that the city and the country has had.
And we were just chatting a little bit. There has been a lot of mobilization efforts for the younger voters. And I was saying that I have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old at home. And when you talk to them, they're very passionate about, and they do care about the system and who is in charge and what it's affecting their lives. So where is the disconnect? Why are they not showing up to vote?
Yeah, I just want to hammer in on the point that young people are aware of the issues going on. I mean, if you log into Twitter, young people are tweeting about it. They're posting about it. So I think there is a disillusionment, trust with the current system. Chicago's elected officials have historically failed young people. The current administration has failed young people in a number of contexts. We saw with the uprisings in 2020, the bridges being raised, the curfew that wasn't communicated with young people to get their input. So I think there have been a lot of things that have kind of have disillusioned young people. But on top of that, the state doesn't have super impressive civics education at all. I mean, young people are getting a semester of civics in junior year. That doesn't cover enough. A lot of young people think of elections in terms of the presidential election. We aren't taught on the impact of the mayor on our day-to-day lives, the roles and responsibilities of the aldermanic positions. We have new races now. We have the Chicago Police District race. And I also think voter fatigue is an issue for sure. I mean, we just are coming off of elections as well. We're going to have more elections in the next couple of weeks too. So I think that's a very real issue.
You all put out a voter guide actually targeting the younger generation Z voters. Tell us about that guide. How can people find it, get it?
Yeah. So we put out a guide every election cycle, and this year we put out our guide, Will You Be My Poll Mate? Because early voting kind of coincided with Valentine's Day, so love. And this voter online at chicagovotes.com/vote center, and it's also been printed and distributed to community members around the city, as well as people detained in Cook County Jail. And this guide is created by our fellows, our young people. It's informed very heavily by the experiences of young people, the issues top of mind. So we're covering things like public safety, the environment, the economy, and things like that. And it includes a candidate questionnaire as well. So we asked all 9 candidates a number of very specific questions pertaining to ordinances. And we educated young people on those ordinances as well, so they're getting that information. And then it's an accountability tool as well. We have them on record saying that they're going to do these things. So now, these next 4 years, we get them accountable to doing that or vote them out.
All right, so what are you going to be doing between now and the run election to get out that younger vote?
Oh, a whole get out the vote. We are going to be up in the schools getting eligible seniors out to vote. We're going to be doing our work, civics talks in the jail. We're going to be partnering. Today we were on the train handing out voter guides, telling people get in line by 7 p.m. We're going to go in because this is an incredibly exciting election for young people, especially having a candidate who's running on a lot of issues that young people have brought to the forefront, validating that the young people experiences is of equal value and the issues they care about can become policy solutions.
Katrina Fitt with Chicago Votes certainly doing her part, you guys, to drive out the younger voters. Back to you.
For sure. And we were discussing this with, we'll bring our analysts in here real quick, the low turnout, David. I know you were surprised that just over a third of registered voters cast their vote, and the youth did not.
3%.
Right, but older folks did. Does that change now when it becomes Vallis versus Johnson?
Well, one way to look at this is generational. Brandon Johnson is a lot younger than Paul Vallis, and his program is tailored to appeal to a younger person. The idea of taxing the rich and also just his liberal orientation across the board, which does tend to appeal to a younger voter. But that 3% figure is really demoralizing for anybody who cares about democracy, and you have to wonder about disillusionment, on a national level, etc. But if there's ever a race that can get people interested, we're headed for one. This is a race that on the issues is going to be extraordinarily interesting, with 2 candidates who have a lot of appeal. It looks like they're going to stay out of the mud so far. They both intend to. They pretty much did so during the course of the general election. So voters, young voters, you've got your shot. Take advantage of it, I would say.
Well, we'll see. I'm a little bit skeptical that they'll be able to stay out of mud. After all, this is Chicago. The other interesting thing was that Jamal Green, who was only 26, was really pushing for the youth voting, was all over the college campuses, and this is his time running, and he didn't have much of a factor in this, obviously. So obviously, young people are just not engaged.
Yeah.
All right, so we're talking about numbers. Ravi has been tabulating all night for us, and now let's go to Ravi to talk about the numbers, how they came in, where they came in. Ravi.
Yeah, that's right, Cheryl. And fascinating conversations that you're all having, and how those kind of relate to where this is going to go in terms of the runoff and what the next 5 weeks. But let's take a look at some of these ward races and try to get a sense of where this conversation is going to go. And before I go to that, I just want to say one thing I found very interesting in terms of the mayor's race. Chuy Garcia has not conceded, as we heard earlier from Mark Rivera. As you can see, he's 100,000 votes behind Paul's at the top, and he is a good, is 25,000 or so behind Brandon Johnson. And he's in fourth place. He's not even in third place like the Mayor Lightfoot. He hasn't conceded. She has, even though that gap is actually a little bit smaller. So obviously he's waiting to see, and we heard from the spokesperson talking about what these mail-in ballots are going to look like. And so that's where his hope lies, but that's the kind of gap that we're looking at. He's 100,000 behind Paul Vallis. Let's take a look, though, at a couple of ward races that are very interesting. Earlier, we heard guests talking about this ward, the 11th ward, and I was talking a little bit earlier about how the race is going down. This is the first, presumably, Asian American ward in the city. There's come only a point by Mayor Lori Lightfoot. She is three votes behind Anthony Ciarvino, who is an employee, a civilian employee of the Chicago Police Department. He's a trainer and works in community policing and so on and so forth. This is an example of where maybe this public safety issue is going in terms of gathering and concentrating the opinions of people in wards that we look at. This is the traditional daily of support, the 11th ward, where it is in the city, right in the heart of the city, the 11th ward, Chinatown and Archer Avenue going right through there, and it's a very tight race. This presumably was supposed to be something fairly easy for an incumbent to win. We're not seeing that necessarily tonight, but as I say, the gap is only 3 votes, so obviously they're going to be watching for every single vote that comes in here. Here's another one that's interesting. Just in the 12th ward, which as you can see here in the city is located a little bit to the northwest, the 12th ward is looking like it might be an upset here. This is the incumbent, Annabelle Abarca. She was also appointed by Lori Lightfoot. She's losing quite handily, 680 votes, but percentage-wise to Juliet Ramirez. A couple of ones that we're going to be looking at to see how what issues were important there and how that affects this runoff race. Back to you guys.
What a great look at the 11th and 12th ward, Robbie, pointing out the importance of both of those. This is Brandon Johnson headquarters. He is approaching the podium. He's visiting with the He looks like he's up there. What a night there for Mr. Johnson, as he appears to have made the runoff versus Paul Vallis.
Yeah, Leah Hope has been at his campaign headquarters on the west side where he lives all night. He is standing by with his 3 children and his wife. They were featured prominently in his campaign ads about what it's like.
Look at that smile.
Because I know, I live on the west side. Presumably that is his son. Alderwoman Pat Dowell standing behind him, of course. Let's listen in.
Thank you. You know I gotta say it. Well, here's Brandon. Well, Chicago, we did it, y'all. You know, they said that this would never happen. I am so freaking proud. Because we did this. You know, a few months ago, they said they didn't know who I was. Well, if you didn't know, now you know. Well, there are so many people who are responsible for this moment, and I thank you all. Of course, I want to thank the author and the finisher of my faith. That is my God. Because you all know this floor is going to be real saved and sanctified. But of course, I want to thank my family. I'm not here without them. Especially to my wife. Let me just go ahead and get this out the way. My wife of 25 years come June. Chicago, a black woman will still be in charge. Of course, to the workers of this city, SEIU 8CII, SEIU 73, the Chicago Teachers Union, Cook County Colleges Teachers Union, IFP, the AFT, and the baddest independent political organization, the United Working Families. There are so many elected officials here and leaders from across the state. Thank you all. Thank you so much. We have shifted the political dynamics in this city. But I want to acknowledge all the other candidates. My good friend, Congressman Garcia, Representative Cam Buckner, Alderwoman Sophia King. There's only one Dr. Green, Alderman Rod Sawyer, and to Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Now, I may not have always agreed with you all, but running for office is difficult, and it is an act of service. Let's acknowledge and give all the other candidates a round of applause.
We are going to take a short break and pause for our on-air audience, and we'll be right back after a short break.
From ABC 7 Eyewitness News, this is a Vote 2023 election update.
And good evening, everybody. A good night for Chicago mayoral candidates Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson.
It appears they will face off in the April 4th mayoral runoff election. Here are the latest numbers. 96% of precincts reported. Vallas with a big lead since the first returns came in. Brandon Johnson in second place ahead of Lightfoot, who conceded about 45 minutes ago.
We are fierce competitors these few months, but I will be rooting and praying for our next mayor to deliver for the people of the city for years to come. And regardless of tonight's outcome, we fought the right fights and we put the city on a better path. No doubt about it.
And Vallas celebrating tonight with his supporters as well.
I feel this city has never really been the city that works for everyone, but it will be mayor.
And Brandon Johnson speaking to supporters right now as it looks like he has locked up the other spot in that April 4th runoff.
And we will hear from him during our special election night coverage on Eyewitness News, coming your way in about 25 minutes tonight at 10 o'clock.
Our live coverage continues on our website and wherever you stream. Join us there.
disasters.
Back at our very special election night coverage here, streaming on IBC News at abc7chicago.com. Let's go back to Brandon Johnson at camp headquarters, where he is talking about being in the runoff election come April 4th.
Where your heart is, your treasure will be also. And the finances of this city belong to the people of the city. So we're going to invest people of the city. Now, I grew up in a very large family. It was 10 of us with one bathroom. Plus my parents were foster parents. We had so much going on in our home on a day-to-day basis. It felt like teaching the Chicago public schools. But I grew up in a home where sometimes the ends did not always meet. Know what it's like to come home and the water's not on. I know what it's like to have a long orange extension cord from our window to our neighbor's window. I know what a disinvested community looks like because I taught in Cabrini Green, USA. And our children from Cabrini Green see and touch and practically walk to one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the entire city of Chicago. From their back windows and out of their front windows, bulldozers staring them down, preparing to destroy their public housing. It ain't right? It captures the essence of the city of Chicago, this tale of two cities. But that's why I'm looking forward to becoming the next mayor of the city of Chicago. Because we are going to finally retire this tale of two cities and usher in a better, stronger, safer, united city. The disinvestment that we've experienced in this city for too long, it's been chronic. It's been systemic. I'll never forget one of my students who had a rough day. Well, all of my students many times had rough days. But there was one particular where we were having a rough day together. And we stopped for a second to reflect. And one of my students looked me in the face and said, "Mr. Johnson, you should not be teaching here." She says, "You should be teaching at a good school." It's not right. It broke my heart then, and it breaks my heart today. And I wanted to change the system. And that's why I became an organizer, fighting alongside teachers across America. Because not just what we're fighting for, it's who we are fighting for. And child under a Johnson administration will ever feel like they are not good enough to have the best. That's why I took that fight as an organizer and I became a Cook County Commissioner. Because I believe that we need to have political leadership that actually speaks to the interests of working people. And that's why on the county board, I fought to expand health care. We put hundreds of millions of dollars into violence prevention. We've built a balanced budget, and we've done it under the most ridiculous and the hardest circumstances. And if we can pass a multi-billion-dollar budget on the county board, we can certainly pass a multi-billion-dollar budget when I'm the mayor of the city of Chicago. You know, I told you I would tell you the truth, Chicago. I'm always going to keep it 100. You see how they already fact-checking me? Look, no, Mr. Mayor, you said you're going to keep it 100. I'm going to keep it 100 with you, Chicago. And as good as we feel right now, you all, I'm going to tell you the truth because there's another candidate that made it into the runoff tonight. His name is Paul Vallis. So we about to get real. If you are not familiar with Paul Vallis, let me tell you a little bit about Paul Vallis. See, Paul Vallis is someone who is supported by the January 6th insurrectionists. He switched parties when President Barack Obama became the president of the United States. He went as far as to say that he is more of a Republican than anything else. These are his words. He said that he fundamentally opposes abortion. These are direct quotes. As head of the Chicago Public Schools, he ran the teachers' pension fund into the ground, closed neighborhood schools, and punished students who were in need. He took it to another region of the earth. When he went to Hurricane Katrina, after Hurricane Katrina, Paul went to New Orleans and privatized quarters of the city's public schools, of which caused the largest decline of black educators. He left similar messages in Philadelphia, Connecticut, and of course right here in Chicago. This is the truth about Paul Vallis. He has literally failed everywhere he has gone. In fact, Paul Vallis is the author of The Tale of Two Cities. He is backed by the same forces, done nothing as crime has paralyzed our city. He's backed by the same supporters who have failed to enforce the consent decree, even after Adam Toledo, Laquan McDonald were killed. The forces who are sticking their heads in the sand as our city's budgets go deeper and deeper in the red year after year, with property taxes going up while our schools stayed underfunded, those same forces are trying to reinvent the very person who's responsible for the mess we're living in.
And the campaign is officially underway.
Yeah, the school teacher versus the CPS CEO. It's coming down in 5 weeks on April 4th. I want to thank you both for joining us here
both of you.
all night long. David Greising and Laura Washington, of course. It's been an interesting and an amazing night. Thank you so much for that. And of course, ABC 7 election results, analysis, and reaction tonight, coming your way tonight on ABC 7 on Eyewitness News at 10 o'clock.
David and Laura, you're back for the runoff. We've already saved your seat.
Right.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.